gotten to be a popular one.
Oh, definitely. My mom went there. So
Oh, did she? That's a connection?
Yeah. When I got in, she was like singing the fight song and stuff.
Aw, dear. It definitely is like one that I feel like always like 2-3 kids go every year.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Wait, I'm trying to think, you know who my daughter, do you know who my daughter is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, so I'm trying to think if anybody from her grade went there though. I don't think anybody did go from her grade. I feel like a lot of people applied though.
Definitely.
Boulder.
Oh, yeah, people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, remember Karen Campbell?
Yeah.
Her son graduated.
Yeah, her son went there, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Pat. It's always like one that, like, I feel like I've always known like a few kids, like from I have older sons, and like it was just one of those ones that like I always knew, you know, like it was like relatively, in a way, like because even like where my daughter goes, like right now, there's not that many, like people like it, but I guess it's like she goes to Miami.
Right. Did you know Harry McNulty?
Yeah.
He just committed there.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. I gotta tell Chloe. Because she played tennis for Sherry. She like loves her Sherry. She's always like, Sherry's my friend. I'm like, he's your coach. And then and Malcolm was in Chloe's grade. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta tell her that. I don't think she knows that.
He just decided like last week, I think.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I told you that could be the new place to go.
Yeah, wow. Beautiful. This weather's like perfect.
I don't have one, but
That's funny. Oh, I gotta tell her. That's hilarious.
Hi, Maureen.
Hello.
Did you eat?
I did eat. I was like,
Excellent.
and now I like
You were making
overate.
me
I went from
you were
being like
making me-
hungry to like stuffing myself to like
Okay, you were
where.
making me nervous. I was like, eat something.
Oh, sugar. No, I just.
Blood sugar. I am like, I'm the
But I
poster
usually
child
don't eat.
for
It's
that.
like, I swear, you would think I should be
cannot
like
skip
40
a meal.
pounds.
No way. I can't do it. It's like, I get hangry. Okay.
It just happens so much. And I have
Well,
like, if
that's
you see the amount
true.
of
I mean,
food I have in
I
my
can
house,
eat
it's
it odd
insane.
times, like, but I can't skip a meal. So I think today I had lunch at 2, but I had
Yeah.
lunch. You know what I mean? I can't miss it.
I'm gonna start being better. I've been better about
And
being
I'm
better.
usually good. I try to block in a few, like
It was funny though. I was like, well, I'm gonna get Sequoia, and then I called her and I closed my legs. I'm like, oh, that's right. It's like, you know when you have like your set, like I'm like, I know what I'm getting. Right? Exactly. I'm all set.
you asked.
I don't like that, like when you think you want something. I'm gonna text my daughter and tell her that. It's so funny.
Nothing. I'll do it. It's better that those requests come from me. I was just under the impression, because I never ordered that, that it was already quote. There was. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's a quote, but the quote is from the vendor, not from the. Do you see? So then we have to go with education law compliance paperwork. If we get it from Boces, they've done it on our behalf. And then we would be like.
Chloe will be happy because especially if the mother comes to visit with her because like she like loved her like they, you know this when she's like even with tennis because even when she came up like during the break she's like oh I gotta go buy the tennis courts to see.
Yeah, even when I used to go over there in middle school, I like loved hanging out with her.
She's so nice. I know, she is like
not
so
the
nice.
not the McNultys, just
She's
Sheree.
so yeah she's like so
Those all
nice.
go
It's
through
fun.
me. Hello. They'll have to approve the software.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? Good. Everybody notice the new chairs? They finally came in.
Oh, yes.
So now you can actually fit under the table.
Oh.
Bumping up against it. Huh?
Look at that.
You're gonna roll around the room. We're
be rolling to
We're
see
gonna
each
do a
other.
race after the meeting. We're gonna. Sorry.
I don't have a.
There's plenty here. Well, somebody else. Oh, just.
Feb 7, 2022. Thank you for everyone here, administrators, our Board of Ed alumni, Jody Meyer, shout it out.
Yay.
Celebrity.
It is exciting.
You can just get up and leave whenever you want. Okay. I don't quite have the agenda. So yeah, why don't we kick off? I think we're going to have some brief announcements from the administration because we've got a fair amount on the agenda, including the media report. So I'll pass it over to you, Dr. McCursey, to take us through some announcements.
Sure, thanks. What I tend to do is let the announcements and the agenda speak for themselves, and I'll go into actually the correct order tonight. I'll start with COVID-19. I don't like to, but I will. Then I'll do some brief district highlights, and at the tail end of that, hand that to Melissa Szymanski for a very key set of updates. Then we're going to be super brief in terms of the typical administrative reports from Maureen and then Melissa, because we want to give the board plenty of time to first dig into the proposed FY23 budget, the first part which we'll explain, and then after that, a fairly new thing, the mid-year state of the district. But I too want to thank the principals, directors. I'm not going to go by names, but principals and directors, thank you for being here. You work very long days, and I tend to be cautious of your evening time. The board hasn't noticed it, but I think for the two topics tonight, it's important you're here to help the board come to an understanding of both the budget at this point as well as the mid-year update. So in terms of COVID, we actually have some good news. The data you're seeing nationally is playing out, certainly here. Whoops, you all right? Playing out here in Westchester County. As most remember, ICU at the end of the day, what started with George Latimer, virtual, and his team. But the numbers of active cases have dropped to 3,000. You may recall just a month ago it was at 36,000, the active cases, so it is dramatically down. Hospitalization and fatalities are also dropping, so we are where we hoped in terms of, as you've heard, this incredible spike and coming down the other side. The superintendents in this region, and I wish I could be as smart as the rest of them, but they not only run districts well, but they're incredible activists to the point where a couple of them become very well known to the governor's team, I've heard, over this weekend, advocating for a topic I'll get into in a second. And indeed, I'll share with the whole board, two districts have come together, Rye and Harrison, with Eric Byrne and Lou Wall behind it to create an advocacy campaign with the governor on the following, which is, can we have a sensible way to not have masks? But let's be sensible, not political about it. And that started before we learned what New Jersey is going to do in March, and where I live, Connecticut, we think the governor there is about to make an announcement regarding masks. And now I heard exactly what the governor of New Jersey said. We know it's an early March date, but everybody's hoping for, and I don't like using the phrase, but I'm using it, an off-ramp, meaning in terms of metrics and other guidance, why is it we're not wearing masks? So make it be as much scientific as possible and not political. So the superintendents in this region have been writing to that effect with the governor and the governor's team quite actively the last couple of weeks, enough so there were some conversations this weekend that involved the governor's staff quite directly with some of the representatives of the supers in this region. But again, to make it really clear, it's that we as educators, we value masks right now because it's important, but we value getting them off. But let's get them off in a very thoughtful, smart way. As many of you know, I'm able to get in classrooms a lot. I go in and guest read. I guest read with this on, and it's doable. I think I would say right now, those who are very concerned about masks, it's more of an adult issue than a student issue. But again, hear me. We as educators in this room, we want to be safe, and that's masks now. We also want them off, but them off at the right time. I think I repeated myself enough on that. So let me come to a couple other things, because masks coming off, nothing simple. If masks come off without understanding what it means for quarantines, we could actually see quarantines go back up. Because right now, and as Amy can say, one of the main reasons that we don't vaccinate, excuse me, wow, good slip, that we don't quarantine for those who aren't vaccinated is if they are masked up and at a certain distance away. So if the mask mandate comes off without an attention to the quarantine issues or distance and all the rest, physical distancing, we could go backwards on that. So that's something we're very concerned about as superintendents. And secondly, just as an example, if people who get COVID come back after the 5 days, what's required of them? Do they have to have masks on or not for that remaining 5 days on the 10-day period? So these are things that are getting paid attention to. But very much right now in New York State, we're paying attention to New Jersey and to Connecticut as well to see what we can find out. Very important on this, and I've had a lot of conversations with the administrators here and others, with Nate Morgan on behalf of the teachers, is if the mandate goes away, what does Hastings do? Well, the decision probably would be before the board. What I'm sensing from across the region is if the mandate goes away, there's increasing willingness, or excuse me, lack of willingness to go into a mandate at the local level. And that's primarily because who determines the metrics that when masks come off? Because if you're going to mandate, it's not forever, right? We don't want to be wearing these things forever. So is that going to be up to local boards of ed to determine the metric at which point these come off? So even in the last week, I've seen it swing from if the state takes back the mandate, takes it off, that we may be into, and I'm not saying what Hastings would do, but we may be into an optional approach, heavily encouraging the wearing of masks. And also the time of year that this occurs will affect things, meaning it may be mid-March as we're seeing. But that's a general sense. We can talk more about that as you'd like. Last thing, it is a technicality but important. On Friday evening, it's amazing when you learn these things, at 10:30 Friday evening, learned that the New York State Department of Health had given more flexibility for those students age eligible but not boosted. Up until that point, if you did not have the booster or age eligible and you had to quarantine, you come back to school under test to stay, but you cannot participate in your extracurriculars. They modified that to say you can participate in your extracurriculars, but not in a competition, meaning just within your own district. So the upside to that is, and it's particularly around athletes, frankly, athletes could practice with their teams, but just can't go compete against other teams for those 5 days. Very, very important. Hastings has been a very healthy place, and we're even more healthy. We put out the daily data Thursday, because we were in an ice storm Friday. Thursday, the data went out. I think we had 1 case. Today, the data went out. We had 5 cases across 4 days. So we're doing a very good job here. And I thank the families, I thank the staff for that. So that's the COVID update. Let me swing to some good news. First, I thank the principals. I'm going to do it again. Thank the directors for being here. Second, I'm going to go from the oldest in the district to the youngest. I just went from the oldest. You're the oldest, sorry. Second would be the Hastings High School's National Art Honor Society, connected with underprivileged children in Cameroon through their artwork in cooperation with a nonprofit group, the Memory Project. So students were paired with a child in Cameroon and created handmade portraits for the child to keep. Second update, I'm told that our 7th and 8th grade 1 acts are set to be held this Friday. Is that correct? Yes, great. I'm glad I have the correct information here. That's a 1 act. Did you notice that? The 6th graders at also that school with the 7th and 8th graders read to Hillside Elementary School students as part of their expressive reading class. And was that a good job? Yes? Thumbs up? For those on the TV, I'm looking at the 2 principals of those wonderful schools. So that was a plus, Amy and Jennifer? Okay, great. Then the Hillside Elementary School 4th grade safety patrol, who I do witness at least once a week. I'll be back out there, I think, tomorrow. But are holding a coat drive for those in need through the local nonprofit Family to Family. And donations are being accepted until the 18th of this month. Do I have that correct, Amy? Okay. And again, it's a wonderful sense of the giving back that just characterizes Hastings in so many ways. Lastly, as a sort of tease for the board, I met this past week with Melissa Chandroff to talk about the science research program. I've been learning more about it, and I've been unabashedly celebrating it, which it deserves. So Melissa and I talked about the fact that, do you bring forward to the board some of your great budding scholars? And you said, yes, we've always done that, and certainly the competition winners. So I suggest, and I have to run it by the board, would be willing to find some time at a May or June meeting to hear from more of the students. Because as I learned the topics just this year, food allergies, economics, wetlands, ornithology, animal behavior, music and dementia, looking at that relationship, and Gus, you may be able to tell us some more about the program, but I thought if we can find an efficient way to bring more of those scholars forward, that would be fantastic, because it's a rigorous 2-year program, as I understand, and that's a lot of work, and the level of work is impressive, and I think it's a powerful symbol for Hastings and the great work that's going on here. Melissa quickly agreed, so now it's up to the board to agree with Melissa Chandroff, and we will find a way in May or June to do that.
Great.
So let me turn to Melissa Szymanski, who will give an update, the final one, before we shift to the other work tonight.
All right, so last week we hosted Racial Equity Week throughout the district, and each building designed a day that provided opportunities for students to consider at developmentally appropriate age and grade levels how racial equity affects our world. The days were designed by committee with input from diverse stakeholders, including the administrators, teachers, students, staff, and community members. And I'd like to thank Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo for her leadership in the planning process and in bringing these programs to fruition. At the high school, the theme was environmental justice, think locally, act locally. Students engaged around environmental justice issues that are currently impacting the county, especially lower income communities and low income members of wealthier communities. The Sacrifice Zone, which is a 30-minute film, was shown, and that was followed by guest speakers associated with the film who answered questions and provided some context to the film. Educators then led classroom discussions, activities, and action-oriented workshops. And the part that I caught following the film with the panelists, they were talking a lot about, almost the screening behind the screening, what was actually happening to them as they were filming the piece, which was quite interesting, and that's not reflected in the film, so that was really quite interesting. Farragut Middle School. The theme at Farragut Middle School centered on understanding the ubiquity of media in our daily lives and its impact on race equity and social justice. Students participated in various learning activities throughout the day and listened to a panel discussion on representation and the media. And then at the elementary school, the theme was Never Too Young for Justice, and City Love led an engaging, developmentally appropriate assembly to build community across our differences, talk about race, hope, equity, and belonging. The speakers were funded through the HEF Speaker Series grant, so thank you to HEF for the speakers, and the movie viewing was funded by the Race Matters Committee, so thank you to Race Matters.
Maureen, are you going to wait do you have something to go through now?
Just a really quick update on the work around the district. So the music suite did open, I think, since our last board meeting, and the students and the teachers are able now to use the space. We are still waiting on the remainder of the furnishings to come in, so once that's in place, we'll have some type of real grand opening for the space, but there was no need to continue to hold them out of that space. Just wanted to point out at Hillside, we're currently working with the village leadership and some local landscape architects in ways that we can still consider making some changes to the, there's a roadway and some of the walkways at Hillside that would be better for like flooding and things like that. So there will be a proposal that the board that will be recommending to approve just some modification of some of the original plans at Hillside. We had considered them earlier in the construction, but we wanted to see where we were with funding at this point prior to making those, putting those forward, as some of them are more costly than what we had initially contemplated. But, we've been having conversations. I know Dr. McCarthy's been speaking to the mayor, and we just wanted to, for anyone who's interested, just to, say that with the rain, I think there was some concerns just about, water in general, and some of these improvements will help, with some of the water that comes off of the Hillside property.
So that's it, and then I guess we'll go right into the budget.
We get just two more things
Oh,
first.
sorry. Oh, that's right, you have student report.
Sabine and Gus, student report?
Good evening, everyone. The band and orchestra had their first rehearsals in the newly renovated music suite. I'm definitely excited about the new storage space in the facility. The space will be more organized. Each student gets an assigned locker for their instrument. The band also started rehearsing a piece last week that was composed by Jasper Zimmerman, who is a Hastings High School student. The language department has an interest meeting tomorrow after school to introduce the process of earning New York State's seal of biliteracy. While only seniors can begin the process, juniors are welcome to attend tomorrow's meeting. Both the girls and boys basketball teams are finishing the regular season with very impressive records. Best of luck to those teams in the upcoming playoffs.
So the track team had its last regular season meet this weekend, and times were great all around, but Ben McNulty, who's a senior, stole the show. He broke the 55 hurdles record for the school, which is super impressive. We've also got a couple runners who are going to state qualifiers. That's Emmett McGrath, Pat Maloney, Celia Silverstein, Anna Thomas, and Noah Engoff. And Celia's actually just was talking with the coaches at Carleton College in Minnesota, and she's officially going to be running on their track team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so as Dr. McCursey was talking about, there was also JSHS this weekend, which is the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium. So it's one of the big competitions that the science research program does. And it was fully virtual because of COVID and was a little bit rocky from what I've heard. People had trouble with breakout rooms, and it was took longer than it was supposed to. But it definitely, I'm sure people did awesome. The award ceremony is actually going to be held tonight, so we'll definitely be back in 2 weeks with updates about how everyone did, but I'm sure it was awesome. As far as sports, the wrestling team just finished their season. They did super well, so congratulations to them. As far as COVID, from our perspective, anxiety seems to be pretty down. With very few cases, it feels like less of a presence. And I think people are kind of looking forward to the summer, to spring sports, and the idea of being outside with those masks down, and hopefully maybe even in school, as you're talking about, Dr. McCursey. So just before we finish off, I just want to talk a little bit about Project Share, because it was our first midnight run in the last 2 months. Because of COVID in January, we weren't comfortable going down there. But we delivered about 300 meals and clothing and toiletries to homeless folks on the Upper West Side. There's just this cool story that happened over the weekend that I thought would be good to share with you guys, because it just shows how special it is and what a great program and what it's doing for the kids in the high school. So we were at the stop on right by Central Park, and there's this man who's homeless that clearly couldn't speak English and spoke Spanish, and Oscar Hayes, who's a sophomore, went up to him and started talking Spanish. He doesn't speak Spanish at home, but from Senor Lopez's classes, he's pretty comfortable. Senor Lopez is awesome. And he started having a conversation with him. And it turned out that the guy was from Peru, which is where Oscar had spent 6 weeks over the last summer doing a language and service program. So they ended up having a really special conversation. It was just kind of a nice little moment that I think really encapsulates the kind of relationships, positive impact that all these people at Hastings are having, doing stuff with Project Share. So, yeah. That's it.
Super. That's great.
Thanks for the update, guys. I just appreciate the level of information you provide us in the real window, very quickly and focused. It's really helpful every week, so thank you for that. Okay, public comment. So does anyone have public comment?
The first one for the, on the agenda, right? Is that one is the general one?
Yeah. Well, we'll let Jody.
Yeah.
Well,
Up here?
yeah.
Okay.
We'll give you a
let's
mic.
grab Gus's mic.
So my name is Jody Meyer, 15 Forest Ave, from Hastings, and it's wonderful to be here and to see so many partial, warm and familiar faces. I was thinking, sitting here, first of all, I want to thank the students. That was a great report, and what a great story to bring to the board. I mean, really, it's fantastic, both of you. So I didn't come here to listen to the budget presentation. One of those things I get to zone out on. But I thought maybe I would tell you that I was going to run for the board again. But I'm not. I'd rather be grandmothering. So, but what I did want to tell you is that I really miss you guys a lot. You know, I love being a part of this group, and it was so much a part of my life for so long. And I love this year watching you from afar and watching how you've worked. And I give you so much credit. It is beyond difficult, and it's just very impressive. And I want to give a special thanks to the old board members for your time and your dedication and for hanging in there. I know how hard it is. And I haven't written letters to you because I haven't wanted to bombard your mailboxes because I know what that's like. And to the new board members, I want to just give you a special welcome and hope that you are able to allow yourselves to take and learn from the old board members. You don't have to always agree with them, but they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom, and I think it's really important if you can take advantage of that. One of the special thrills that I've had this year is watching how you, Bill, have become a part of the district. And I so commend the board on being able to work together with Bill. And I cannot tell you how delighted I was when I saw the email, and I didn't have any inside information. I've really stayed away from inside information since I left the board, that they were going to offer you a contract to extend. I think many of you know that I'm a big sports fan, and I love signing people in their rookie years if they look like they're going to be all-stars. So that really meant a lot. And I want to say that I love reading your messages every week. I am blown away by them. They highlight to me communication. I feel like your communication is incredible. It feels, to an outsider, very transparent, and I think you have modeled for us what it means to be a transparent communicator. I really understand why people in the district, faculty and administrators, have felt like they have loved working with you, and that it's a bit of maybe a breath of fresh air or just a relief. But I think that I just see how you've brought such leadership to the organization, and it's a relief to me as someone who's no longer so involved to know that there's somebody like you at the helm working together with the board. And I think I so applaud your leadership, but what also comes to my mind is how much I think you've been a healer. And I think that's something that we have all longed for and needed for a while, for a long while. I'm not just talking about our most recent superintendent or anyone in particular. I just think process-wise, organization-wise, it's something we've needed, and you have so stepped into that role. And I'm delighted that you've agreed to stay on, and they've extended your contract. Now, maybe I particularly liked this last week's letter. I actually sent it to my son, who's in education. I told him I thought it was a great example of communication, but also because I thought he'd like to read about the Hastings basketball team, which, of course, people here, many of you know, is very near and dear to my heart. And that the two seniors are both people who played rec basketball, as did Sabine, right? And so that sort of really stuck out. But anyway, I just want to say welcome. I love you all. I miss you. I still love Hastings, and I hope, Bill, I'm assuming that you're beginning to get a feel, if you haven't, for what a jewel of a community this is. Obviously, we have our warts and we have our pimples, and that's real life. But I think that this is an incredibly special place, and I'm glad that you're able to start to call it home and that we can welcome you to our home. So I love you all. I miss you tremendously. And life does go on, but it's not always so easy. And hopefully someday we'll all get to be able to hug and kiss without stupid masks on. And I just brought you all a little Valentine's.
Oh.
Pass around and share.
Started here.
Thank you, Jody.
Miss you, Jody. Miss you.
Thank you, Jody. That was very nice.
You can vote on anything tonight.
Exactly.
Let's go 4-4. No, you and I don't.
I don't know if anyone wants it.
Oh, my goodness. Those are beautiful.
It's chocolates that say love on them.
I think we should
I
start
think
it
only
with
board
Bill,
members who
I
have
think.
no questions should get chocolate.
With no questions. Wait till the end. Works for me.
If you take one, you're guaranteed no questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, if all public comment could be like that, bringing chocolates.
Yeah, right? It is on tape.
Well, I think it's people about worry when they come to me, what are you going to make public comment about?
Okay, so now we're on to the budget presentation.
They didn't take.
Oh,
Good night.
I'm sorry, I have the
Good
chocolate.
night.
We'll just pass it back this way, thank you. Bill, did you want to start? You were going to...
Yeah. Jody, thank you, because you were part of some conversations before you stepped down that were highly influential to my thinking. So you were part of the reason that somebody said, I'm thanking you.
I can't hear anything.
Well, I want to thank you personally and professionally, because you were on an interview group back last spring, and you answered questions in ways that hooked me. So thank you. So in terms of the budget, bringing budgets together is one of the wonderful challenges, and I use those two words purposely, one of the wonderful challenges that administrators do. And it's, yes, there's a core team at the top, but it's representing the whole leadership team, some of whom are here, worked very, very hard on this. And I've been fortunate to work in very well-resourced places my entire career. And there, the budgets are even harder, because there's both the sense of being very well-resourced, then the perceptions of being well-resourced, and particularly on the public side, as I've been the last 10 years, in communities that value high-quality education, excellent professionals, excellent facilities, excellent programs, particularly in the public sector where we have to embrace special education. Remember, I worked in the parochial and Catholic school world and the private school world. And I'm going to say it, they do not have to embrace special education. Some of the finest special education schools are independent, but public schools do not have to embrace special education. We have to embrace it. It's an ethical and moral imperative. And it does bring with it then some other challenges for us to think about in terms of resources, but that's the wonderful side of that challenge. So as we go into this process here in Hastings, we are a very well-resourced place, but we also are a place where each resident cares deeply that we're maximizing each of the dollars they provide. And here, as again, where I've been before, particularly the last two stops, Weston and Greenwich, it's substantially the homeowner, substantially the resident that is carrying the weight for us financially. And so as you'll hear, as you've always heard before, but you're going to really hear, it's a balancing act for how do we expand, accelerate the great quality of programming we have here, the facilities and all those resources we need to provide for students, and balance that against what are real concerns of any resident as to the tax level. Now, this state helps by putting limits, less so than the state I just came from, but they're also, they're natural limits just because of being respectful of those who provide the resources. So we brought to you a budget. I think it's a very good budget. I think it balances those sets of interests I've just laid out. Maureen's going to walk us through it, somewhat in a very familiar way to what the returning board members are used to. This is the first part. You're going to get the entire budget, all of the totals, and then it digs into the non-instructional side. And as Maureen will say, we will be back to you in several weeks with the instructional side. To put it metaphorically, I'd rather have you drink from several glasses of water than try and drink the entire thing at once. and be able to pace out what you're hearing and seeing. We are willing to talk with you as much as you need as a board to answer all the questions. That's one reason you've got the principals and directors here tonight. But tonight will be at least the first look, and then we'll just keep digging into it as much as you need us to dig into it. But in sum, please see that we're striving to have a budget that advances quality, high-quality work for all of our students, and balancing that with what are the realities for residents in Hastings and what they can provide financially. Maureen?
Yes.
Lori, before you
Yes.
before you start off, I think the current budget is posted in executive content. There's some people that were just texting that in the public that wondered, did we want to put it in the? Did you have
Yeah,
something?
sure, it can be.
So you can
yeah,
put
you
it
can
in
move it up,
public.
yeah, okay.
There was, the one though that's in private has a last slide that says, we'll be adding a few.
Yeah, I'm gonna, because
Is
just with the timing tonight, I
So you don't
decided
have-
to
there's
move
nothing-
those.
There's not a
No.
separate, there's not a
No.
different one you want to put in public than this one.
So, no,
Is this-
because
That's the
that's
final?
it, that's the one,
That is
because
still this-
when I
okay,
spoke to them,
got
I
it.
had a few, but then I decided, because I was thinking it was in public, so that's why I decided not to put them in there. But,
Okay.
now just, like, meaning during the day, I thought it went
Okay.
public, so.
So it's okay to
Yep.
make that executive content
Exactly,
public?
yep,
Okay.
and then we'll just like,
Good.
drop that slide later
Okay.
for the permanent record. Okay, so just, now I can start, okay. Yes, so as Bill said, this is our first opportunity to kind of share what we've been actually working on for quite some time. I've said this before, the budget really is a 12-month process, at least for me, and it is a constant. Not only are we constantly looking at what's coming a year ahead, but we're also looking at the impacts of our budget for 5 years as what helps us to kind of make decisions and understand what we have coming down the road. And as we are considering the upcoming budget, it is always good to be thinking a multi-year. So this evening, we're going to, different years we've presented it differently, where we've shown an overview of the entire budget. This is how we did it for many years traditionally, and a lot of districts choose to do it this way, where they show the non-instructional portion of the budget first. And although there may be plenty of questions around that, because the instructional budget is the largest component of our budget, we felt it better to kind of dedicate a couple sessions exclusively to that. And then for this evening, we can kind of go through this. And then if there's any follow-ups, we could also come back to the next time, the next meeting in February. So for tonight, I'm sorry, this is not working? Patrick, I don't know if this is working. Yes, I could just I can go up there and do it.
Is it this one here?
Hooked it up to the clapper.
Oh, is there, maybe it's a different
Sometimes it
clicker.
works.
Do you have a Fonzie move too?
And that's it. Oh, there we
Hit
go.
the side
Okay,
there.
perfect.
Hit it on the side.
So just to kind of provide an overview of tonight's meeting, we are going to share and just update you. The board had previously adopted the budget calendar that has some dates that are legally required and then some of our own internal dates in terms of when we're presenting different parts of the budget. We'll just review some of the budget goals that really help us when we're focusing on how we prioritize different aspects of our budget. We'll be providing a budget summary, which really just shows how our entire spending plan, what we're proposing right now, and then again, we're going to go into more detail on those non-instructional areas. We'll just kind of touch upon some of the major factors impacting the budget, as well as review the tax cap and some of the funding challenges that all schools face. So just again, as a reminder, we do have another meeting at the end of February, and at that time, if there are some additional details based upon tonight's discussion we can provide, that kind of gives us the ability to come back to you. But then the plan would be on March 7th to really dedicate a large chunk of time in breaking down that instructional budget. And then the later meeting in March also will be continuing with that discussion. And then, as you can see, these are just kind of key dates that are there. There's some other dates in between where by April 1st, by that point, we'll have a final budget that will be shared online with the community, and that's our actual budget book document. All the presentations we do up until that time, of course, will be online as well. And then April 19th, which is a legally required date, which has to occur a certain amount of time before the budget hearing. The board will be asked to adopt the budget. And then on May 4th is a budget hearing. And again, this is a legal requirement, which happens 2 weeks prior to the actual district-wide budget vote. And that also allows another opportunity, which it's kind of interesting because that is a state-required date, but it kind of falls after the board already adopts the budget, which is always a little bit interesting in terms of timing. But it does then allow, we would be starting a budget hearing prior to our regular board meeting to allow folks to come in and speak specifically about the budget. And then again, March 17th, budget vote and school board election. As we approach, again, each budget, we are reminded, and we've spoke about this before, that a budget really is an articulation of the goals of the district and the priorities. So as we just kind of have a couple key points, obviously there's more than that's listed here, but we always look to strengthen Hastings high-quality education for all students. We want to maintain our core programs and resources. We are always looking to create opportunities for all students to access higher level and rigorous courses. We want to make sure we're providing professional learning for all personnel, again, investing in facilities, and then also to try to be fiscally responsible, manage a school budget within the tax cap levy. Purpose of the budget. The budget really embodies the beliefs, values, and aspirations of the community for all children, ensures that the district has resources to educate all students. It motivates the system to be strategic in planning and action, and it aligns fiscal planning with long-term initiatives. And that's when, and we'll be talking about this at a future meeting, just looking at our 5-year fiscal planning and the alignment to some initiatives we may be thinking about. But then there's the budget realities, which is the other piece of the equation, which is enrollment changes can be beyond what our trend data is, which then requires us to, change some of our thinking to address class sizes. Special education, Dr. Boces had mentioned it earlier, it is a challenge for all districts because the needs of the children really drive the expenses in that area of the budget. And they're really based, as you can see on a few bullet points, we included here the complexity of an individual student's needs, out of district tuition, if that's the best place for a student to learn, new enrollment that is always unknown over the course of the year. We have many new students entering the system. And again, although we're very grateful to all of our legislators and our governor for making good on the increase in the promise of what was due to us in state aid, even with that, what I would call a significant increase that we'll review shortly, our expenses continue to outpace our revenues because state aid is a smaller portion of our total revenue package, where our homeowners, and that's the last bullet there, the tax burden is mainly on our homeowners, which is similar to a lot of our neighboring districts, and due to that, it does, put a lot of the burden, the tax burden on them. So that's always something we need to balance as we're putting together our budget. Just as a reminder, major drivers of expenses, this is a slide we just put every year, and as we present the budget, we'll dig into these a bit more, that these are the major things that even when we're just starting our budget and looking at our forecast for next year, we have our contractual obligations. 80% of our budget, or probably a little bit more at this point, is just for staff salaries and benefits, much of which are already, just part of our rollover budget. We then have our programs, pension costs, health insurance increases, enrollment and class size, capital projects, and debt. And again, those are those investments in our facilities. And this is just to this sort of demonstrates what I had spoken about on the earlier slide. When we start looking at our budget, these are some things before we even contemplate either something we may want to add, like a new program or new electives or some of those, a new sports program. These are things as we rolled into next year's budget that when we started to roll our expenses, and some of it, again, is related to different students' needs. When we rolled our existing or projected staff between salary, contractual increases, services and tuition for students with disabilities, legal expenses. Again, these are just highlights of kind of some of the larger drivers. Technology, infrastructure, and devices, the cost that's passed along to us from our local Boces, which the cost of services, retirement costs, health insurance, which actually was very low this year, actually, utilities and service contracts, and our debt service. So as we will go over tonight, this is the first year where we're seeing that new debt for the $18.3 million bond that we issued a few years back. The good news is that all the work will be completed before we begin to really meaningfully pay for it. But this particular year, a big chunk of that $3.5 million is, in fact, that first debt payment coming online. So that's why we were, although even if you take that out, you can kind of see how the expenses year over year are, go up a significant amount.
Maureen, just
Yep.
quick, is there a time where you're going to show a chart that kind of shows the breakdown of that 3.5?
Yeah, so-
dollars in percentage?
Yes, so I think we will be kind of wrapping back to, we'll be constantly kind of reminding people of the drivers of the budget. Tonight, we'll speak specifically, and we'll be able to kind of demonstrate the areas of the non-instructional budget and the dollars associated with the increases there. And then as we go into our next budget presentation, we'll start to really then remind people, and you can kind of, because even when I go through the budget, I'm like, wow, that it adds up relatively quickly, so we'll definitely break that down in a little bit more detail as we present. So again, how do we kind of then, as we're working through the budget, how do we balance that budget? So this is a process, and as Bill had mentioned, it's something that we do with the team. Of course, the teachers and many of the chair people are involved with providing, either their budgets into the building level people, and then we kind of look and try to create a spending plan. So we look to emphasize student learning, maintain commitment to initiatives. We try to focus, again, because fiscal sustainability, occasionally you can afford something, like as an example, this year we had a lot of federal monies, meaning this fiscal year coming in, and it was wonderful, and we were very happy to take that money. But I think, as many of those who were on the board last year, we really struggled with, being careful not to either overcommit to like creating a bunch of new positions with that money, because then it may be a year or two from now, we would find ourselves in a pickle. So, we're always looking at, as we add something to the budget, we want to be able to add it comfortably, understanding that in the, the years coming beyond that next year, that we'll be able to sustain it. We consider efficiencies. Again, anytime either there's a person retiring or any type of opportunity to kind of look at staffing, programming, personnel, things change occasionally, things that you may need one year, you may not need the next. We do look at all these areas, even if they're relatively minor expense areas, we do review them for each department to ensure that we're not over budgeting or we no longer need it. Okay, so budget components. This is just more of just kind of providing some definitions of as we speak about these four categories. The four major components of a budget, those are definitions that are required by the state, how they group expenses. So they're put into four kind of larger buckets. General support, you see under that heading what's included in that category, and those are some of the areas we're going to be reviewing this evening, because that's considered a non-instructional expense. Obviously, the instructional part of the budget, which has all those titles there that you can clearly see. Transportation, again, interestingly, the last two, I would argue, all of them really do have to do with instruction, although this is, again, the way we're required to break down our budget. Transportation is a direct service for children, so it's just interesting that it is considered non-instructional. And then undistributed, and other than the debt, that category includes all our employee benefits, which again are tied to individuals who are either being paid through the instruction. But that is how we're going to present it, because that is in fact how we're required to break down our budget. Okay, so budget overview. So again, we provide this each year, and I know it's a little bit hard to see there on that screen. And this is really, again, as I mentioned, there's 4 categories in which people, when they're trying to group categories together, this is the way we're required to kind of, if we're summarizing them, put them together. And as you can see on this screen, you can, as we spoke about earlier, you can now at least see by category, and we're going to go into detail about what within each of those categories is driving those increases. So as an example, Doug had mentioned, are we going to see where that 3.5 million comes from? And you can kind of here now on these slides get a sense of what, how that 3.5 million or so is being broken up in terms of increase. And tonight, again, we're going to review the general support where you can see on the screen, and I'm going to speak in more detail about what is contributing to that increase of a proposed right now $287,000 increase in general support. As you can see, when we're not going to be covering this evening, but the instructional budget right now is showing a $1.8 million year-over-year increase. Pupil transportation right now, and we'll get, again, that is an area which we're going to dive into a bit more this evening, is going up about slightly under $200,000 we're projecting. And then again, the undistributed employee benefits, I had mentioned the big driver in that bucket is really the new debt service. So the majority of that $1 million is the new debt. But again, we'll be going through that in more detail, and you can see how that breaks out. Then on the revenue side of the budget, and again, looking at that number, that $3.5 million number, how then do we balance it on the revenue side? And we're going to provide some more details about a little bit further breakdown about these revenues. And again, the way they're broken down here on this general overview really are captured within categories. And we'll break down state aid, which is, again, it has multiple pieces to that. And we'll discuss a little bit about, the drivers there. Miscellaneous receipts, I have a slide to kind of break down just so you have a better understanding of the different revenue sources the district receives. And the good news is both of those categories, both the state aid, obviously, I had mentioned earlier, and we've been speaking about it at previous board meetings. We are, based upon our projection from our governor, we're looking at an increase of about $700,000 there. It's wonderful. There were many years that number was actually going in the other direction. So yes, sorry.
Sorry, can you confirm the table title for the percentages at the last column? What was the title there? I'm
sorry. It's just a budget to budget change.
Okay, so that's showing the increased percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So as you can see, that we're very happy, and although that's extremely helpful, $700,000, you can see, as I had mentioned earlier, when your budget is growing by $3.5 million, it's definitely helpful. But as I had mentioned, our expenses really do outpace quite a bit our revenue growth. And we'll break down, again, I'll go into further detail on a later slide about our miscellaneous receipts, mostly driven by local sales tax and some other revenues. And then we'll have opportunities either at this point or at further budget presentations to speak about the appropriations from both the reserves that the district has on hand and appropriated fund balance. And really what that refers to is that would be money that's pretty much left over this year from this year's budget spending plan, and that allows us to offset in the following year's budget. We've done that since I've been here. That's a fairly common practice, and the good news is that in years past, we were appropriating significantly more money. This amount represents, I think, a balanced amount, considering we have some new expenses coming on the books. So we are making a recommendation with this budget proposal to increase that a bit over last year's allocation. We did receive quite a bit of money in federal aid this year that came in through our revenue. So, the recommendation would be to either use that to offset next year's tax levy. Retirement reserve, we'll be looking at that in a few slides from now. We are predicting, we're not predicting, we know that our retirement obligations for next year will be going up. The rate that the district has to pay to the TRS, which is the Teachers Retirement System, is in fact going up next year. And the reason we've been able to establish and fund reserves are for times like this, where when we see an uptick in what our payment is, it would be appropriate to increase the appropriation from that reserve. And at a future meeting, we'll be able to provide you kind of where our reserves are now and with those appropriations where that will leave us at by the end of the year, because that's a question that would, if you use this now, what does it look like at year end? So we'll be reviewing that at a future budget session. And again, we're just appropriating the same level from the tax certiorari reserve, and this would be money that would flow back into the budget as we, because as we were able to pay down some obligations, when there's excess money after those obligations are met, we flow that back into the budget. But we'll speak in more detail at further meetings about revenue appropriations. So in terms of where does that put our tax levy for next year to support the $3.5 million increase, that would require us to levy an additional $1.9 million worth of taxes. You'll see on some slides that are coming up that in fact is a tax cap compliant budget. And the effective tax rate, which is interesting, and we can definitely dig into this more if anyone had any questions around it. As you can see, we're right now, based upon the current assessed valuation for next year, that would actually be a reduction in the tax rate. Now, that doesn't mean that an individual homeowner's taxes would be reduced, but it's saying that because there's assessment growth, that the actual effective tax rate is still going down. Obviously, if we didn't levy anything, it would go down even further, but depending on your individual property, we'll speak about more what does that really mean in terms of impact, but sometimes it is the way we need to show it. It can be a bit confusing when, people see we're levying a bunch of $2 million more, but yet the effective tax rate is actually going down. But we'll speak about that, I think, a bit more in detail at a future meeting. Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you want me to?
On this slide? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Do I have to give back my chocolate?
Yes, yes, I'll take that.
So, if I'm reading this correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong, if I look at the adopted budget versus the estimated end of year, right? It looks like our estimated amount of spend is, $650,000 lower, right? And when I look at our adopted budget for revenues and the estimated end, it looks like the revenues have increased by, I don't know, 500K or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at like maybe 1.2 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? So did you say what happens to that money?
So I was saying, at the end of the year, you're not required to appropriate it to offset next year's budget. The way we've been able to fund our reserves is based upon how much money each district, obviously has either some money left at the end of the year, because you have to, it would be unusual not, if you don't, then you have another problem on your hands. So what typically happens toward the end of the year, if, let's just say there's $2 million left over in the end of the fiscal year, we had $1 million extra in revenue and $1 million less in expense. Bill and I would then make a recommendation to the board and say, we're recommending that we put X amount in this reserve. We'll use X amount to balance next year's budget. So right now, conservatively, I know we have $800,000 out of those two kind of buckets. Obviously, it's more than that. That I'm saying we don't want to take the whole amount. We want to. What would happen in this scenario would be that there'd be a recommendation to replenish one of the reserves, because as you see, we're also recommending to take $850,000 out of the retirement reserve. So,
But what's in the retirement reserve?
How
much is in there?
It's about 1.6 million.
Okay. I was just wondering, have you ever, could we consider taking part of that for the property tax line so that the village doesn't have to worry about that?
So we are.
Take some of the money, so we put some in the reserves and then the other goes in. So
Yeah, so that's what we're doing here.
So got it. So
Yeah.
that's what happens. So where are those numbers here? Like the extra.
The reserves?
The extra money and the reserves.
That's a separate, those are not shown, that's part of your, it's part of your balance sheet. It becomes part of your balance sheets. It's usually, not usually, we will definitely be presenting the reserves, because it is definitely part of, as we consider what we're A, appropriating out of them, B, how much if we appropriate this year, how much will we have left? Interestingly enough, I was on the phone today with our financial advisor, and we had just received, which I can't actually share publicly, but our Moody's rating, which we just got back today. And actually, we confirmed our AA2 rating and kind of all the process that goes in there. And interestingly, I was looking at one of the indicators there, which we know is your amount of reserves, meaning school districts, government entities. Really, the preference, which we've never had because it would be quite a bit of money, they're looking for you to have 27% of your operating budget at all times. Like, that would be their preference, free and clear, not like, so, not but we are, when I was looking at it, not that it would really be difficult to even probably get a better rating than we have, because there's only one rating above that, and I don't know anyone who even has it, but they were suggesting if you had more money in reserves, and I'm not saying that, because we would never have that type of money left over, but I think as we talk about reserves, it's important to understand that all districts have them. It is a balance, because although you want to use some, if you use them all in 1 year, you're going to have a double hole the following. So as we look at what we currently have in reserves, what we're looking to appropriate to balance 22-23's budget, we'll be looking at that 5 years. So saying, okay, if we're appropriating this much, we think we could maybe put a few more dollars back in. And there's a reason you have to do it. Like, you have to actually show you're using it and replenishing it. From an accounting standpoint, there's only a certain amount you're allowed to, how you have to kind of show it flowing through. Every district I know has like a certain amount of reserves, and I think using too much in 1 year, the issue is you fall off a financial cliff a year or two later. So that would be the reason not to, like, use it all in one shot. So that's why where you see here, the recommendation is looking at what we sort of needed to balance our budget. And we'll speak about the tax cap and why although in this scenario you could say, well, we could lower that number a bit, it would just kind of put us in a tougher spot next year. So managing how much we use to offset the budget, how much we're using out of reserves, there is a lot of thinking that goes into it, and we'll get into that a bit more. But you can see kind of over the 5-year period, if you end up using even too much in a few years, that you can kind of quickly end up with some like budget holes 2 to 3 years out. So
can I just, to really clarify, put a really fine point on it. So you came up with that number, like 1.1 million, right? Between the less costs and more revenue. So you'll see appropriated balance under preliminary budget 834,843. That's 834,843 of that 1.1 million. So now there's 300 grand left.
Got it.
Then Maureen and Bill will come back with a recommendation of what should we do with that. We should put in a reserve. Well, which reserve? And then we vote on which reserve it gets put in. So they're making a judgment call right now. Of that 1.1 million, 8 and change, we're going to recommend you use towards next year's budget, 300 some, we're going to recommend you put in reserves. And we can have a discussion and debate about that.
Got it. Thank you. Clear. Thanks, guys.
And maybe if we move through, let's flag questions, but why don't we keep moving?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great question. Let's just, if we could, just keep moving through.
Yeah, and we could talk
list
about
of
reserves for
questions.
2 hours. It's a lot.
Yep.
So,
I think they may want to stay.
Okay, so again,
Here's
Oh,
one
sorry.
pause. So I've been having this like 9 PM like cap on like whether you, and
They're older than last time.
right, they've matured since the last meeting. I want you guys to feel like comfortable getting what you need and what we need. We've got a lot from you. You also know your own schedules and what you're working on, and there can be a lot. So if you want to, I'm always going to say 9, here's an invitation to leave. But if you need to leave before that, please do. And please know that we are, as long as it's not like 7:45, please know that we are, we'll support you with whatever you have going on. Okay, so it's really up to you.
And you might be budding public finance experts, so maybe you want to stay.
If you want to stay, there's a lot to learn here.
That's true.
So Maria, you want to keep
Sure.
going?
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Stay as long as you want.
And Jeremy's not going to ask any questions.
I want that chocolate.
So we now are, as I mentioned before, so the revenue summary, and again, this is just kind of provided to give you a little bit more details behind some of those larger numbers that we show as a summary page, and just sometimes people are interested, like, other than property taxes and state aid, where are some of the other sources of revenue that the district, as a quick kind of summary, the district charges outside groups that are using the building. Many groups use it at no cost, but there are some after-school programs and some other uses of the gym that provide us some income. Years ago, as many know, when there's been some film shoots in the district, we've actually received hundreds of thousands of dollars there. But, right now, there's nothing on the horizon. So, right now, we're conservatively budgeting out of $35,000 next year. Day school tuition, we do have some students that parents live outside of Hastings, and they choose to send their child to this district, and we bill them tuition. It's for next year, it's estimated about $20,000 for K-12 tuition per student. We also have some districts that place some of their students in our in-district special education programs. This year, that number, I think we always have to be, I'm very conservative when I budget that number, because that particular revenue could represent only anywhere from 2 to 4 students, because most of the students are they're higher cost students to the district. And if one of those students we've had, where there's some years where we've received more than we anticipated, because we're not quite clear sometimes on who may send their child here. Those decisions are typically not made till later, where we have the full commitment from the district. And we've also seen where children move out of districts and then we no longer have them. So although it's a great, so if we can support it, and it's something we can do within our own staffing, and it's not going to be more expensive for the district, we do accept the students if we can. But as you can see, next year, right now, we're projecting, we have a few of those students that are scheduled to go back to their home districts just based on their age of the program that they currently attend. So just, just wanted to kind of highlight some of those. We do, interest rates are very low, as we all know, although the Fed's putting it up in March. But right now, we are kind of holding that line steady, and that's money we make on our money as it sits in the bank. This year, I just want to highlight the middle column on the next line, and this is some of the driver of those higher revenues for this 21-22 fiscal year. This is some of the monies that we received back from the federal government, and that was some of it was refunding us for some of our COVID expenses that we incurred. So, this year you'll see that was the way that was recognized, was it was taken in as a refund to the district for expenses that we already had paid out. So that is obviously a non-recurring revenue in terms of, like, in future years, we're not going to see those type of refunds back into the district. And then the other ones, just to kind of quickly go through, one of the things that we were required to do this year, which is a new revenue line, other student fee charges. So typically our school trips were handled in, it's called the trust and agency account, which is, it's a fund that is not in our operational account. With the GASB, which is government accounting standards, they make changes from year to year, and they are requiring us to handle all those trips through our general operating account. So as we go through the detailed portion of our instructional budget, you'll see that we are now showing, like, trips as an expenditure line, but this is for parent-funded trips, so that's why you see this revenue line showing. So it will be a wash in terms of it. It will show an increase on the expense side, but we have a corresponding revenue that we now are budgeting here, and that's based upon estimates from all 3 buildings of the trips that all the students were anticipating to take next year that would be funded by their families. Again, admissions to theater is like another one of those lines. We get money when people come to see our plays. We will be, for the first time in many years, billing out health services to other districts. That's primarily due to, my goodness gracious, help me?
Yeah.
The one at Andrus?
No. Oh my gosh, why am I, it's because we're after.
Yeah.
8 o'clock.
I know it is.
Just give me 2 seconds.
So there is a private school that was recently established. So as that school has grown, the need to provide nursing services and different related services to children that attend there, some of which are Hastings, some of which are students coming from other districts. Because of that, we are able, there's some really specialized services that some of the students there are receiving that we're currently paying for. So this revenue, it is shown, we'll have an expense on our expense side of the budget, but it will be reimbursed. So again, it's looks good on the revenue side, but we really do have expenses that we're paying on the other side of the budget for those services. On borderline properties, we have a bunch of property in both Dobbs Ferry and in Yonkers that the property line for those properties is split between Hastings and Dobbs Ferry and Hastings and Yonkers. In those properties, the students are either able to attend our school or the other school in which their property resides. And this represents the money we get back from that district. We bill them to kind of, if the children attend here, to recoup some of those property rebates from Boces for services that we've paid for in prior years, because Boces is required once they close their books to run a zero budget, so they need to return to us anything they have overcharges on. Not overcharges, they estimate what the charges need to be. So those are just some examples of unclassified revenues. Again, I spoke about the sales tax. Sales tax revenue is wonderful, and beyond the increase that they put, I think it was 2 years now, that the property, the sales tax increase went into place in Westchester, but the sales also have been very, very high the last couple of years, so we are anticipating to receive what we received this year. And then, again, the other big driver of new revenue is the state aid, and primarily driven by our foundation aid increase. I just want to note here that although we're concluding our building project, because of the way the state aid runs on the building project, we're getting like a catch-up payment the following year. So we'll speak a little bit more about the way that works. So although we're paying for the debt, we will get all the money they owe to us, but the first aid payment for that work occurs when 18 months after either the contract was signed. So, there may be an adjustment to this number, meaning we may end up receiving more state aid next year. We're just closing out our project, so I didn't want to represent it here until I was sure we were getting that revenue next year, because what would then happen is then the following year we would see a larger chunk of building aid coming in to make up for that first aid payment. And then, again, the appropriated fund balance, retirement reserve, and the other amounts that we spoke about on the previous slide. And then, of course, the large property tax levy needed to support the $56 million budget. So now, state aid. This is, again, just to kind of go over, where we are in terms of this cycle. So again, state aid, this is a really brief summary of about 500 pages of how they calculate each school district's aid. It's really, it's very interesting, but what it really comes down to is the way state aid is allocated to districts. It makes sense of how they calculate it. They look at the wealth of a particular district, demographic information. They do look at real, I'm talking about the side. I'm looking at my screen. They look at real property wealth is a component, and of course we know that in this part of the state, the property values are significantly higher than upstate. So again, that is something that either determines, how much state aid a district receives. So it does make sense. I just want to give you a comparison. So districts like Rochester, of course, they are high needs districts. Buffalo, and some of the less financially stable districts upstate, their budget, they're receiving about 85% of their budget is supported by state aid dollars, where ours is 10%. So just to kind of give you, it's significantly, most of the state aid, there's a lot of money that goes into public education in New York State. Between New York City and some of those high needs districts, they receive the bulk of the money, and it really is based upon, obviously, the factors as we spoke about, because it's based upon need. Districts, believe it or not, like Yonkers, New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Vernon, because they're located in Westchester County, they're significantly underfunded for the needs that they have in their district. So because of their high property values, that does cut the amount of money they would normally receive. So where we are in terms of the budget process, our governor, executive proposal, it's typically usually the lowest of the numbers, so, well, at least in past years, the starting point, typically it gets a little bit better from there. I have sat on a couple meetings with the legislators, and the sense I'm getting is since this particular governor has in fact has actually fully funded or committed to fully fund the state aid, unlike our previous governor, occasionally those numbers would be significantly lower. She's put a good amount of money into the education fund for her budget. So I don't anticipate the numbers to change. So in past years, I would say, well, this is a real low ball number we're getting in January. It's more than likely it'll go up a bit once the legislators are able to kind of work with the governor. I know that our legislators, my group is meeting with them, I think, next Friday. We have some other items, being that we were kind of told, like, listen, a lot of the money is already represented. We don't anticipate having a lot more money given to you, but there may be some other things we can help work for districts that may be better for us, such as like relief around the tax cap and some of those things. And I'll speak to that when I get to the slide that breaks down the tax cap. And again, the enacted budget, they've been on time for the last few years, so it is due in April. And that's based on their state's fiscal year. And I keep clicking.
Maureen, can I just check in, do a quick time check? Like,
yep.
How much time do you think? I think we're about halfway through here.
I think the rest of them are probably like another 2 hours. Another like 15 minutes. Another 15 minutes.
Like 15 or 20?
Yeah.
We want to target that?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
It's hard to know because it's like a lot, so I don't want you to think I'm
No,
rushing through the numbers either. It's hard.
We're balancing like education and sharing of decisions being made at the same time.
But I like that, we've put it out there for the public, and we've put it out there for the board members, So as you guys, as we all absorb it, we are allowed to write questions directly to Maureen during the week. And we put it all, if there's something big you want to know about.
So for example, you're going into tax cap calculation. I still don't understand this completely, having been on the board for 6 years, how, and some of this, there's like magic numbers in here. I don't know exactly where they're pulled from, but, so it's this kind of stuff that we can go through fairly quickly. And
When we go to the line.
I'm just saying.
You're never going to understand it.
Yeah. But I also think that even if you've been here for 6 years and you don't get it, so I think I'm totally assimilating, and I don't think we need to totally rush everything. Like this, we wanted to start it early, but some of us that I just knew we really want to fully understand it. And I'm typing my questions, but like Jeremy said, I would rather email it to you than try to spend so much time. But I would rather we don't ask questions here, but understand. So I wouldn't want her to be rushed. You get what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that we would rather write the questions than. So I'm totally.
Yeah, I think that's because I'm trying to balance there with some of the board members.
I'm totally understanding. That's why I'm quiet.
Okay, so this next, we spoke about all these. This is just, again, summarizes, the increase is similar to the expenditure side, just kind of highlights on the revenue where some of the increases are coming from. So again, that's, as Doug had mentioned, the tax cap calculation, this sheet here that is actually the sheet that we fill out and we submit. It's a copy of what that looks like. So just to kind of, again, this is given to us by the state, and there's different factors, but really the long and short of it is that New York State, I don't know how many years back now it is, close to 10 years, they enacted what is called a tax cap. And really the idea there was to, of course, limit growth on people's property taxes. And there is a formula that is given to us to calculate what that increase from year to year is, and it is there are certain aspects of the tax cap calculation that are individual to each district, and that's why some of them, if you were to look at somebody else's, some of the factors, other than the allowable levy growth factor, which is the same, everything else is unique to a district. But I won't necessarily go through all the details of it, and we can definitely speak about it. I could speak to people individually about it. But based upon our calculation and what this year, of course, no surprise here, CPI we all know is well over 2%, and the cap for calculating the tax cap calculation can never exceed 2%. So that is in fact our allowable levy growth for everyone. And then in addition, we have some other allowable growth, because one of the exceptions to the tax cap is when you have approved debt that is coming onto the books, because that was previously voted on by the community, that can be added to the tax cap calculation, because if it wasn't, you would then have to cut like a considerable amount of your budget. So what does that mean for Hastings? That meant that we were allowed to increase our tax levy, being tax cap compliant, by 4.35%. Currently, we are, the budget that we've shared with you this evening is just slightly below that calculation. So we're just $28,000, a little bit less than what our allowable full cap would allow us to levy. And again, the reason we share this, and a lot of districts do, because there is always a lot of talk around tax cap and all these different, different things, and it just kind of just threw this slide in here so you can review, or anyone at home, kind of just some of the, as we refer to different parts of it, what we're really talking about here. So, again, it's the CPI. Most know that's a computer price index. Again, even when it is the reason it's always been something that all districts have struggled with, because although there are years, of course, where it's less than 2%, we're now finding, especially this upcoming year, that is way higher than 2%, but yet even if we have expenses that are exceeding that 2% growth, our budget cannot exceed that. And that is some of the conversations we've had with legislators, asking for some relief around that, even if it were just in some of these higher years, if there's anything that either can be added to the tax cap as an exclusion. So I know we're in the process of talking about that. Again, for this evening, I'm not going to go through all of these slides. I just kind of included them here because the next few slides are our entire budget. And again, this is kind of the next level down from that summary detail. It's a little bit more of, it's still a summary, because as we go through all of our budget meetings, we're going to then unpack each of these lines. So tonight we're going to go through the general support, as I mentioned, and we're going to get into more detail. I typically just have it here, just again, this is our first budget presentation for people at home. They have an opportunity to kind of review each of these larger areas, and if they have any questions around them. But I'm just going to quickly go through these, because we're going to get into the details around the non-instructional portion of the budget. So again, you can see our budget, and our budget has to be balanced. Although there are years in which either one number will be higher or lower, when we present our budget, it always has to be presented as a balanced revenues and expenses. So here we are with the non-instructional budget. So this will actually go a little bit quicker, and I don't know if there are any, we're not going to ask any questions, is that on?
I'd suggest wait. Yeah, okay. I'd suggest gathering them up.
Okay.
Because then at the end, I have a suggestion on then how we can best be of help.
Sure. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, this is, and the function codes on the left, there's an order. The way our budget, it's the way we report our budget, the way we report our financials. It's the left, the function, you can think of it as like a chart of accounts and accounting, and these are the accounts assigned to these particular areas. They're statewide, and that is how districts present their budget in order of those account codes. So the first area here, Board of Education, I know everybody on this panel knows, but Board of Education is not paid, they're fully volunteer. Occasionally people will just see this kind of title, and there's all the expense related to this area, again, is typical how districts budget and express these expenses. And just as an example of what some of these represent, we have board policies that we're required to keep up. We do pay a service to assist us in that. There's a cost in that, in maintenance of that service. The board docs in which we use to run our board meetings, there's a cost for that software and the maintenance of that software. The district clerk, who just left the room, there's a stipend that she receives to be the clerk of the board. And again, from a budgetary requirement, financial requirement, and how we report our expenses, it's required to be represented here. And then again, our annual vote, we do have to pay people to run and work those votes, as well as rent the machines and the ballots and such. So as you can see in this area, the area in which there's some increases, mostly driven by the current stipend amount for the district clerk. Again, these were estimates last year, so it's not that we're anticipating a large increase, but rather that it represents what the current district clerk receives. So that's part of the increase. And then the remainder are just for memberships, the board. And when I say the board, it's really the school district belongs to like NISBA and West Putt, like the different board affiliated ones. And there's a couple that are school district affiliated memberships that we, as do most districts, participate in. And some are for advocacy and just to make sure we're getting all the up-to-date relevant information. So as you can see, we're projecting that increase to be about 7.32, but again, that's really based on actual expenditures this year rather than a large increase. Central administration, that is the superintendent's office. Again, that is the way it is represented in other districts. That's the title of that department. This department, these particular lines, it represents the salary for the superintendent, his instructional staff member, not instructional, administrative assistant support member, and then some other kind of contractual services and supplies for running that office. Most administrators, there's certain professional memberships. Again, it is for the superintendent, but it is more for the school district as a whole. And as you can see, the increase there is based upon projected salaries for those individuals. Finance, again, that is the business office department, and that is for all the folks that work in the business office, which includes payroll, employee benefits, purchasing, accounts receivable, general accounting, and claims auditor, and all of our auditing. And all of these different auditors are required by law. I'd be happy if that could be cut out. We have many different audits that the district is required to have, and there's a cost to perform those. The main driver in this particular area of the budget is the folks in my office that many of them are in a union, and that represents their salary increases scheduled for next year based on the union that they're represented by. But other than that, we're relatively flat. Again, this is just on the previous slide. You'll notice in my office where the contractual services for the business office are a bit different than you'll see in other departments, because this is just some examples of things that are really not, we have to participate in. All of our employees, we manage a cafeteria plan, Section 125. That's like a 403B 457 plan. We have 150 employees that participate in that. There's a lot of IRS guidelines around that. We have to have an outside party help us manage that. There's about 40 different plans people participate in, so that is a requirement to make sure we're IRS compliant. We have file bank, which is a storage retention. That's really for the entire district, but again, on many of these, this money is budgeted within the business office, although it represents like district-wide services. Because we don't have much file space here, we have a tremendous amount of file retention off-site that we do have to pay for. Huh?
You want to, is it the next
Oh
slide?
gosh, I'm sorry, I keep this, I gotta stop looking at my thing, sorry.
You're just trying to confuse
Yeah, I'm
me.
sorry, I know I am. You're like, wait, I know, see if you're awake. Again, these other things bidding, but I just want to highlight this because that particular, if you look at it's like $35,000 and it really does get eaten up. This is a year over year, we have financial disclosures and all these
But
different
if it's
things.
35,000, it's the teeniest items we're gonna see anywhere, pretty
Yeah.
much, right?
No, only because in other areas, like in other offices, you'll see it to be like 5,000. You might be like, oh, Maureen, how many professional
How
organizations
many
do you
file
belong to?
cabinets
you
you
know?
got?
So, and then legal, again, legal services, the board's aware, obviously, we're required to have legal counsel. We pay a retainer with some general legal services that we, obviously, it's an important service. We use quite a bit of it. It is an important thing to do with everything we do, from staff to contracts and anything we engage in. As you can see, there's different, we're basing it based upon this year's usage of that legal representation. We are projecting a decrease in some of the litigation. Again, this is a pretty preliminary number, but I'm basing it based upon this year thus far. So overall, we're kind of going up in one area of legal and down in the other. Personnel, that is our human resource department. There's one staff member that is assigned to that, and that's really for professional staff, which a lot of it has more, it's not on the benefit payroll side of things, it's more on the professional licensing and all the things that go on in schools that require us to have a person who's overseeing that department, making sure everyone is up to date with everything they need and helping us recruit. The next portion, so this is a portion of the budget, and we'll go into a bit, well, I'll highlight here the kind of drivers. In our buildings and grounds department of our budget, which I'm sure many of us just as homeowners who are experiencing right now, we're seeing a large increase in utility costs. We were notified of that a few months ago. It actually started, it's hitting us a bit this year with our last couple rounds of bills. The Con Edison bill, I think, is up about 20% over where it was last year. So right now, based upon, and again, this is based upon what they've given to the district, suggesting that we anticipated an increase of somewhere close to a 20%, in some areas more than that range of an increase in our utilities. And when you already pay a good amount of money, when it goes up 20%, the dollars add up pretty quickly. We are also looking at putting a couple more dollars under the construction manager and architect side of the budget. What we found is that it is really invaluable, even when we're doing some small repair work around the district, to really have some of those professional services, because there's this, when dealing with an old building, we wanted to bump that up a bit. We have some other kind of planning that we're starting to engage in this year. We think some of that will be needed to next year, so that's why you're seeing an increase in those professional services there. And then the others are, like I had mentioned, really being driven with the increase in utility costs, and of course, with having, although this is not the main driver of it, we will be having some more space at Hillside. We have now many of our areas of the building that we've added air conditioning, including the middle school auditorium that we anticipate will be used all the time. Previously did not have air conditioning. So between the utility costs and some increase in usage, we anticipate needing, in this area, the budget to go up a bit. And again, under the Boces services, which again, you see those going up at a higher percentage, much of it is just based on our current usage of those services. Sometimes we try to budget a bit lower, and then what we're finding is some of those costs, particularly like phone service, we have phones, that's driven by whatever the cost was this year for Boces. I think we were a little bit too low on the budget, so we're just kind of anticipating budgeting what we've experienced this year. Everyone has a phone in the classroom. Just the cost of the increased service, and then plus an increase that we experienced this year with that service through Boces. And then the other services, we do a lot through Boces. We have yearly HERA reports, which are a requirement that we need to submit records. You need to have an outside agency. HERA is really to make sure the environmental testing and all that's done. Those services are quite costly. If it's really, anytime you have them come out here and they do any type of air monitoring or testing, it's really easy to run into like $7,000 or $8,000 a day in that type of work. So this really represents what we anticipate our needs will be next year. And then again, to be honest with you, this portion of the budget, and I just want to highlight this here as we discuss it, and balancing, I know we have to invest, we have to make sure we're not sometimes being too shortchanged on our facilities, because the facilities, they do require a good amount of upkeep. And to be honest with you, when we started with this budget process, this budget was going up considerably higher. I mean, Joe Monterano, who is our Director of Facilities, as well as meeting with the individual principals, there are different needs in the building, and we're always trying to balance that. You know, we do have to keep up certain repair work, but there were many requests that came in that we have not included in our budget proposal that we would have liked to have done. We have, you know, just, there's always just a certain amount of things that we would like to address. So again, that's not to make anybody scared, I'm just saying this is an area of the budget that, you know, much of the increases here are being driven solely out of our control, utility costs and such as that, but just to also say that, you know, there were things that Joe and I discussed, or different things that, you know, he would love to, you know, of course, he's our facilities director, he's always looking to improve our facilities, so we really tried to balance that with some of the increases this year. So, you know, as of right now, we feel for next year we can kind of make do with what we have elsewhere, but you know, that's an area we always have to be mindful of, making sure there's a certain amount of money available for anything that needs to be done on our facilities. Special items. So again, like anyone, we have insurance, and that's our general liability insurance that covers all of our property, our vehicles, includes insurance on our employees of all sorts of, not workers' comp, but things such as, like, we have a bond, so if anybody does something wrong and the district gets sued, there's like different types of insurances that we're required to have. We have cyber insurance, we have builder's risk insurance, and this covers it all. And again, we are an insurance reciprocal, and I can tell you that this, the amount of insurance, we're very well insured. They worked very well with us during Ida. They covered all the expenses we submitted to them. And this, although it looks like a large number, it really, for what we're insuring, is not. And then the other items here, assessment Greenberg, that's for our sewer taxes we pay. That's the only type of taxes that the school district does pay. I spoke about earlier that we collect taxes from neighboring districts. We have some of our students who choose to go to the other district, and then we pay them, so that's what that represents. And we do have, I think that's one student that attends Dobbs Ferry. And then the last piece on this sheet that is really a dollar amount is our Boces admin charges. I've explained this in the past. We are a component district of Southern Westchester Boces. That is not, we would, of course, like to participate with them, but that is not, that's a requirement. That's not something we opted into. Even if we use none of Boces services, we would be required to pay this portion. We would have to pay administrative charges because we are considered a component district. If anyone is interested, I know it would take a while to explain that relationship and how these pay and what this cost represents, but really there's a certain portion of the Boces budget, which is, as it says, administrative costs and capital costs, rentals of space that they have throughout Westchester. Each component district, they take those costs and they split them up based upon your enrollment size and a few other factors, and they bill you for it. So as you can see, those year over year are trending at like 5 and 6%. So that's another kind of driver. So as we just kind of unpack the general support portion of the budget tonight, you can see that, you know, we're already $300,000 up just in this one area of the budget pretty quickly. Okay, and now the next part, and again, in between the general support, then it is typically all the instructional codes, and we're really just going over those non-instructional portions tonight. So the other area of the budget that we're going to be presenting is here, the transportation. So transportation, we'll be definitely speaking about this more when we get into the instructional budget, but just for purposes tonight, I wanted to provide you some numbers here. The one piece I just want to say, this budget may change a bit by the time we're final with our budget, and there's a few factors. So we have, of course, the easiest part to predict. We have in-district busing. We pretty much know who those students are. We know where most of our students live. Anyone who's had children here knows that all kindergarten students, regardless of where they live, are transported. So there's certain factors we've built in to our assumptions with in-district busing for next year that we're comfortable with. The one thing is transportation contracts under New York State are not capped by, they are capped by CPI, but not the 2%. They're actually capped by the real CPI. So we do anticipate transportation, and of course it's like makes sense because their expenses will, their cost of doing business is significant year to year. So we do anticipate those contracts. As you can see, I'm anticipating a 5%, and that's based upon conversations I've had with my counterparts in Ardsley who help assist us in running our transportation consortium, as well as conversations with colleagues around the area. What we're anticipating that the cost of busing service will go up at least 5% next year, if not more, based on CPI, which may actually be higher. And then the larger piece, which of course is the main area of transportation that we focus a lot on each year, is our out-of-district consortium. And out-of-district is transportation for all students that the district places out of district at programs. So if we have children that we make the recommendation, we transport them to those schools. We also have parents that opt to either send their children to special education schools or private schools, and they need to notify us by April 1st. And that's why it's tricky. So that's why occasionally you'll see a change in this budget. I don't even know who is going to be applying at this point of the year. So what I've done is I looked at who we're transporting this year. I'm assuming some of the children, if they're in 12th grade, I'm assuming they're going to graduate, so they come off. And we basically just run it forward from that point. The other piece that beyond the application of April 1 that is difficult to predict is we share our transportation with 4 other districts. And what we share many of our bus runs, not all, but most of them, especially for our private school students, are all shared. So, we're one of the 5. So it's Ardsley, Irvington, Dobbs Ferry, and Edgemont, and Hastings. So many of our runs, so if we pay, if there's 5 children on a run and each bus run would be like $80,000, we just split that cost 5 ways. If one of those districts removes a child from the bus, now we just split it 4 ways. So even if mid-year, if I pull somebody off, it increases, by me pulling, it increases everybody else's expense. So it is extremely difficult because not only do I have to look at what I'm getting for April 1st, I don't necessarily have all the information on who will be able to share with me. Will people share? Are those children still going out of district? Are they staying in their district? Do they move? So you'll see some kind of, I think that actually the transportation department does a pretty good job in trying to help us, give us as accurate as they can, meaning they'll assist us on that April 1st deadline. So with all that being said, I want to just question us. This is right now a projection based on our current usage with, as I mentioned, a few children graduating, and with an increase in fuel because we pay our fuel bills separately. We have a contract in which actually is the better way to do it, because if not, the transportation company will always predict a much higher fuel cost than we actually pay. So, but even with that, we don't know what the fuel costs be, and I don't quite frankly know, will we have more students who will want out-of-district transportation? Will we send more students? I mean, right now, I am predicting 1 additional student of ours going out in that number. But other than that, I don't know what parents are going to do. I know there's interest in looking at other options to reduce or, find efficiencies in our transportation. And we can certainly we have plenty of time to talk about the budget. We'll have even next meeting if the board has any particulars that we want to focus in on. But I just want to question you that this number may change. But again, based upon, as you can see, we had more children that actually went out this year than we had predicted, because based upon the numbers, and some of them were children we sent out. That is why we're trending on a higher expense. We're at about a little over $1 million this year. We had predicted about $900,000. That's based actually on our own placement of those students, and that can sometimes happen beyond the time frame of the budget. So transportation is tricky because 1 additional bus to 1 additional school could be $80,000. So I just, even for 1 student, and we have students right now who that is the case. Not to belabor that point, but just to see like how this is, 1 or 2 students can have a tremendous impact. So we be careful not to either. And then again, the sports we're anticipating slightly lower, and then as you know, we have some staff assigned in the busing area. Another large area of the budget that is a good chunk of what of this upcoming driver of the budget is all of our related benefits for all of our staff, actually. So I had mentioned earlier.
Next slide.
Oh, so, God. I'm sorry, I'm just getting in the zone on my computer. It's hard for me to see this. I didn't bring my glasses.
None of us can actually see it. We're just
I know,
pretending.
I know.
My computer, but
I
you're
know,
doing great.
sorry.
Thank you, Maureen.
So again, this is an area that represents for all of our staff, all the benefits that are either contractually obligated for us to pay. Some of them are a little bit different. I'll go over those. So the first line here is our non-teacher retirement. Again, it is anyone that is not a teacher or administrator is part of this particular retirement system. It is called the employee retirement system. It is for all employees in New York State, even including state employees. And that is, we're required by the state to either, depending on the person's role in the district, they either join one or the other. Interestingly, that one is actually going down next year, but they have been higher the last few years than the TRS. And again, they are part of, the overall state employees. So the projection there actually was a little bit better. We're also, as we get in, we're also projecting some changes in staffing levels in that particular area of the budget. So that also is why you're seeing a slight decrease there. And some of it is just based upon retirements and things like that. But when we present the more detailed look at the budget, so it's more than just the rate. There's some other things going on there that we're, showing a slight decrease there. I had mentioned earlier, teachers' retirement system, it is going up next year. It's about $200,000 year-over-year increase for us. Social Security, obviously salaries go up. Our contribution to employee Social Security goes up with that. And we're basing that on about a 2.38% growth in salaries. Where it's really more like 3% because our that's budget to budget, but the actual is probably more like closer to 4% we're projecting. And then there's obviously workers' compensation that we participate in. The good news is we are going down a bit. The consortium that we participate in, which is all districts in Southern Westchester, we've been participating in that for like 40 years. And it's a self-insured consortium, and it's based upon experience rating and the overall performance of our portfolio, which has been strong because we have been projecting a very modest interest rate there. So actually, we were able to adjust those rates down, so we just have a slight savings there. Unemployment insurance, we established a reserve for that a few years ago, which I think is great, and now, because of that, I feel comfortable with the funding level we have in there, that we can zero out this portion of the budget. I'm not sure if many people know, with unemployment insurance, in a company, they usually pay percentage of their total salaries to the government. Districts are so we self-pay whatever unemployment pays to somebody, we get the bill and we have to pay it in full. So the good news is we don't pay as a total portion of our payroll taxes, but when you do have layoffs, it actually, there have been times where that number, depending on the year, can be good or bad. So currently, I think we have $125,000 in our reserve. So I think, we're comfortable not to necessarily budget for that next year. And then the other items are all related to health insurance. We have people who participate in health insurance, and we have people who do not need it through us. If they don't need it, they're offered a much reduced, if a cost, I think cost for a family plan this year is close to $30,000. So if somebody waives it, they may get like a few thousand, $5,000 back. It is a good incentive because it's not completely unusual, but a lot of people who work in public service are married to other people who work in public service. So, some people say, well, why pay the waiver? Because then everybody would just jump into health insurance. So districts, it's a way in order to save money. And if those folks weren't in there, our health insurance number would probably be closer to $8 or $9 million, just to kind of flavor what those buyouts mean. And as I had mentioned earlier, our health insurance, again, we're in a consortium agreement with other schools in Lower Westchester. We're very happy with the rate that they came out with. I was actually quite surprised because they were projecting a much higher rate earlier. They are actually using quite a bit of fund balance this year to deliver a rate to all the component districts a little bit lower. which means we may see an uptick in that next year, because I think they were sensitive to the TRS going up, so they were trying to help districts manage that increase. So because of that, the decision was made to kind of use some reserve to have a lower health insurance increase there. And then, but that all said and done means that our employee portion of the benefits is going up just a little bit under $300,000 year over year. So
Mary,
that,
just pause you for 1 second.
Yep.
This is sensitive to our students. If you guys want to hang out, you can see the end of it, but
You're close.
I know we
Two
said
more slides.
9 o'clock was
See how it ends.
a limit, so. Okay, please, Maureen.
and these, again, I just mentioned, this is some of the rates, and the first two rates are different than the last one, because the first two rates represent the percentage of payroll we pay for these individual groups. The last one's just an actually increase year over year. So not to be confused, it's, it's just they're represented a bit differently there. So next year, for each teacher in the district, we are required to pay 10.3% of their salary to the New York State retirement system. And if you're a non-teacher retirement, they use a tiered blend. Teacher retirement has one amount, they blend their rate, where the non-teacher retirement, they do based on tiers. So depending on when a person was hired or what tier they're in, we pay between 9 and 14% for those individuals for next year. And is that? And then finally, this is the portion of our budget that is our debt service. As I had mentioned earlier, we had some existing debt from our previous project on the fields, and we've been paying for that for, I think, about 8 years now, and that was in the capital improvement 2014 line. And as you can see, based upon this budget presentation, next year will be the first year we start paying on the $18.3 million bond issue. The good news is, although it is a big dollar amount, we didn't borrow it, we're borrowing it next week. We're in the process of, we just, put it out. We already had 7 bidders give us good faith deposits, so we have a lot of interest in it, so that's good news. We anticipate borrowing it at a much better rate than we had when we when we had presented this to the public in 2019. We were predicting a closer, I think with like 3.7% increase or something in that neighborhood of what we anticipated our interest would be on that bond. We're now predicting about 1.3%. So we're about a third of it. So, I mean, although it is hitting, the good news is that the district from a long-term perspective will benefit from a really favorable interest rate. And we also got in under the wire on the construction side. But this will be the first kind of big bump we find in our budget, and a big driver of that $3.5 million increase. And as you can see under the debt, we are anticipating our debt to go up $872,000 for next year. And then under the interfund transfers, and I'm not, because it'll take me too long to describe why these are here and what they represent, but the long and short of it, there's certain things we have to budget under this portion of the budget. It means that it gets transferred to another fund to be paid out. One of the items that is going up here is our students that attend special education programs in the summer as required by their IEP. The state actually does pick up a good portion of that expense, but the expense that we pick up, we have to budget here as it needs to be paid out of a totally separate fund. So this year, we had budgeted a little bit lower based upon uncertainty around COVID and if these programs were going to operate as many of them hadn't the prior year. We're anticipating that most of our students will be back in their programs, and that's why we had to adjust the budget accordingly. So again, that's another $25,000. So the areas we spoke about tonight, as you can see there, that was driving about, I should have added that up before, but the areas we covered today between the general support, the new debt service, we're well over, I think like 1.4 million or so of our $3.5 million increase we've kind of unpacked tonight. And then we'll really, being, as many know, the instructional portion of the budget is much larger, much more detailed, and not as straightforward as what we presented tonight, but we figured to kind of get these parts out of the way, allow the board time to think about what we presented tonight. We'll have an opportunity to bring back some additional information at the next meeting if that's requested, And then anticipate March, we're going to really focus on the instructional budget. So that's it.
Want to change?
Thank you.
No, that's it. Yeah, no, we're done. That's the last slide in the deck.
And
Thank
we
you.
do have posted up for the public, the one that does say we'll be adding a few slides with historical data. That's the one that's posted, so.
Yeah, but I'm going to switch that. I'm just going to
Yeah,
dump
so
out
just so it's in the record that we do know we have to add that. No doubt the board has lots of questions, and one thing we've not talked about here is how to structure that to be of most help to you. So there may be some verbal questions you have now. I don't know, Doug and board, what you've done in the past. I might suggest giving you time beyond the verbal to send in written questions. Let us group those, because some of those may be the same. And I don't know if you've done that, but we actually never had that conversation, whether that's something the board does, buckets them, or you send them in and you let us bucket them and then get back to you in a certain time frame with either written or verbal responses.
I think it makes sense, because there's 3 new board members here, and you might have a lot of different questions, to just
Right.
send them in to you guys. If you want to bucket them, then kind of get back to us, because there's a lot here. And some of it is very detailed on line items, and some of it might be broader philosophical
Right.
questions.
Yeah, and we're wide open to any and all questions, and then what we might do is, I mean, you can think about, I've often found it's helpful to boards to say, over the next 5 days, be thinking about your questions, get them in within 5 days. I'm making that number up right now, please. But that gives you a deadline, then we're able to look at them, group them, and come back more effectively. Either here's a set we can answer verbally, or here's a set that we actually want to put to paper, because some may require that.
I think a week sounds good. I mean,
Is
for this, and then you'll have other versions, right? The instructional might have another week.
And to do them in public, we could do
Correct.
questions at the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll answer,
We have
we'll
another.
get the answers and answer them
Yeah,
in
that-
public.
that's
We
what I
can do-
wanted to
We can
say,
ask anything in
because it has
public,
to
but
be
we
in
can push
public.
it, so
Right.
the presentations now, questions later, and we get our
Correct.
second presentation.
In my experience
Obviously
is,
going.
Correct.
be it verbal or written, it's all public.
Yeah.
So meaning if it's some that we have to, because
Yes.
there may be some that are best answered because they're financials, and maybe best answered in writing, but then we would post a document that lists the questions. We wouldn't list the name
would-
of the source, but
that
we
would
list the
work as well.
question
Correct.
and then post the answer.
That'd be
Correct.
great.
Maybe you've done that before, I don't know, but
No.
that.
For other
that-
things,
I
we've done it,
haven't
but not for
followed
this.
Sounds helpful.
So, and don't look
We
at
did
me
that
like
for the-
crazy, I'll help you with that.
We did that for the
That's
bond.
a lot of work, actually.
No, we did that same
No,
thing
that's
for the
fine.
bond. You
Yeah,
and I
yeah, we
worked
do.
on that
Yeah, we do
together, and
Q&A,
did very
yes, yeah.
extensive
But it's,
Q&A
but
document.
it's not all on Maureen.
But I should say, yeah,
You
sorry,
can go
go
talk
ahead.
with my colleagues. There's a tall guy who carries a lot of the writing burden, so do not worry, please.
But I should say
Yeah.
that that is actually also very tricky because it becomes a document that lives. I know they are recording this is also lives, but then the accuracy is quite important because then,
Yep.
so, I mean, it's the leadership choice,
Yeah.
but we may not want to encourage
Yeah,
that
so-
too often because it can be used.
Right, so let's just see
So-
what, so if tonight's Monday would be fair Monday, that's a week.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So by the close of business Monday, would have whatever questions you have from this first pass, have those come in. And then Maureen and I can sit and sort out, bucket them and sort out which ones are coming back verbally, which ones we do think are written
And
is
can
better.
the community also send in, like those listening, can they?
Sure, yeah,
What,
always.
I mean, okay. I have a technical question. This did not include the salaries, correct?
No,
Okay.
well, it did include the salaries for the
The
non, for the,
For
like, the general support
yes,
kind of
the on-
portion, yeah.
Just the insurance and the.
Right.
So I'm just curious, when you just, well,
Yep,
it's a
sure.
technical question.
Yes,
Under the instruction, when it says teaching, is it the same as salary? So is salary under instruction? Okay,
yes.
got it.
yes.
That's all I have for now.
All right, so
That's
we'll-
easy.
So in 7 days, get any questions, we'll do it again with the next version, and we'll obviously get all those answers out in public, whether it's written, whether it's spoken, we'll figure that out.
But I want to thank Maureen. This was really exhaustive, good. Do you see how I had just one question? You won't get any emails from me.
No, sometimes, like, it's actually easier when people write their questions, because sometimes I'm trying to cover or anticipate what questions may be, and that's why sometimes in something that I know may not be super clear, even the tax cap, that's the reason I kind of go through it, because some people are like, what does this even mean? So it's absolutely will make my life easier in some ways to like write the questions, because then I'm not going over things that you may not be as interested in, or you may know about it, so you don't need to ask a question about.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen.
You're welcome.
So we'll keep moving. Again, I'll give you guys an opportunity. If you want to hang out for the State of the District, feel free. You can also read that online. And
Have a nice week.
we will move right into the mid-year report, State of the District, Dr. McCursey.
And this is really a team effort, and as it's very important for me to say, I own all the heirs here, and everyone else gets the bouquets for successes. I don't know when Hastings last did something like this. The board had asked to do a mid-year, at least with me, an end of year. As the introduction says, this is largely a narrative mid-year. And as the conclusion says, the commitment is to weave a narrative with some amount of outcome data. One thing that impresses me greatly about Hastings, it's very mature communities I'm seeing in terms of understanding multiple measures, multiple perspectives on how we're doing. So I don't want anyone at the end to go, oh my goodness, this is going to be some kind of quantitative statement in June, but rather I want to make it clear to you as a board and the community that's paying attention that this narrative matters, that's highly qualitative. It's a set of hunches as to how things are going, some real feedback already mid-year, but by the end of the year begin to tie some of these same themes in with what we may have as measurable, be that numeric measures or more qualitative measures. At the front end of this, I tie this to the leadership team goals that were established at the start of the year. I stress that those were a starting point for this team. While much of the team has been here for a long, long time, once you change the team a bit, i.e. a new superintendent, it's in many ways a new team. And so I didn't want anyone here, particularly the leadership team, to go, oh my goodness, those are the goals, as opposed to they're guiding us, there's things we want to strive for. And in future years, as we can blend the leadership team goals with the board goals and the strategic work that will emerge through the North Star process, that then it becomes much more of a, well, this really is it, how are we doing against it? This is more a guidepost. So that's the front of this. I'm going to jump to the themes at the end. And you've got the principles and others here if you have questions about the in-between, but the themes at the end, which are pages 12 to 14, those intentionally draw exactly on what was shared with me by the principals and directors and the assistant principals. And I will hit the headlines here, but I want to stress that what we stand for in Hastings, what you all stand for is, in my mind, growth. It's student growth, and it's a broad set of growth. It's the intellectual, it's the creative, it's the social, it's the emotional, and the physical. It's that sense of full understanding. Just going back to my point of the quantitative, some of these things you can measure quantitatively, a lot of it you can't. So that's why we have to be mature, as we are in Hastings, about this. But a number of themes emerge from across the schools and the district-wide departments. One is an intellectual and academic focus. And I think you want to think intellectual, not just academic. Academic to me is the sense of books and the sort of the real the classroom learning. Intellectual is that sense of using my mind well. That should really be what we strive for, is the use of the mind well. Second is a social emotional learning. That's a real theme here, and we set out at the start of the year as a theme, because particularly with COVID and what our students and staff have been going through the last 18 to 24 months, we had to pay attention to social emotional learning. Culture. I mean, culture is a complex term, a big term, and we put it here quite simply, maybe elegantly, is are we keeping things positive? Are we keeping things positive and striving for that? Fourth is diversity. Particularly as the leadership team looked at the first draft of this, there was a stress that we need to raise up how much we are committed to diversity and in the fullest, broadest sense of that here. So I put in bold a standard. I'd put out in one of my Friday letters that our standard should be to embrace the full diversity of who we are, maybe it's whom, but who we are as an educational community, to do so in a fashion that's thoughtful, inclusive, and a path to dignity and respect. I think that's a lofty standard, but one that Hastings should live up to, and I think in many ways we're there. Fifth is gauging progress, and to me that phrase matters. It's where we are over time. Are we moving ahead? And to do that in multiple ways, and as you as a board have heard now over the last several months and saw in this document, we've taken big steps in Hastings with the 2 screeners we have, one on, if you will, the intellectual side of the house, and the other on the social emotional side. And that's a piece of this, but there are other ways to gauge progress, and that's something we've been looking at and we'll keep looking at. 6 is professional learning and capacity building. That's a theme here. And it's my sense that the vast majority of us in Hastings as your professionals care about constantly learning and growing and building our capacity in key ways, and that runs through this mid-year. 7 is communications. It's been a big priority for the board. I think we've made a lot of progress there. There's a lot of work yet to do, but that's something that the leadership team was one of the first to say we need to get better about our communications within, because if you're not sharp within and how you're communicating, the external, it always matters, but you got to have the team inside, and I mean everybody on the inside feeling communicated with, that they can trust, feel heard, and express things, learn ahead of time on key decisions, even the Friday letters and other things. We've been trying to have staff get those a wee bit before. Whom to contact, we corrected the grammar. Thank you, certain board members on that, but that took a lot to get it together. It's a work in progress still, and hopefully that'll help people know whom to turn to when they need to. Collaboration. That's a theme of the upcoming tri-state visit. I think it's one to really set as the standard. I tucked in here a new sense of what does collaboration mean? It should mean commitment. It should mean commitment. If we're collaborating well, we're going to generate commitment. We're going to have employees who aren't just complying, they're committing. So I just tucked in something there if you're paying attention. To grossly simple, we get collaboration. If it's working, how do I know? I got committed people.
Yeah.
They're not just complying, but they're committed.
Yes.
And I can go unpack that one later for you. But I think I see some people agreeing.
I agree.
9, quality education facilities and settings. You have a wonderful, we have a wonderful footprint here. It's a rare footprint in the sense of this facility and Hillside up the hill. And as you get a chance to see what's being invested in both here, the music room just here, upstairs, the auditorium, as I understand, hasn't really been used much, and to bring that back in what's going to be a fabulous way, because I'm allowed to walk it, I've walked it. And then what's occurring at Hillside, I know in any community there's a debate when that kind of investment goes on. I think that it was the right debate and it's the right outcome. It's going to be really quite a spectacular addition to the school, and something I think Hastings can be really proud of. And that investment matters. And we've been very tight on the budget this year, as you've heard from Maureen, on issues of facilities, but we have to watch that very, very, very carefully. Lastly, COVID, I don't need to belabor it, but I think you can read what's here. But this continues to be a challenge. I think there's a bit of waiting to exhale moment for us here now in Hastings, is that can we really get to the next phase? And even if we get hit with another variant, I like to say it's a variant, meaning we've been here before, we know how to deal with it, so we can work with this. So lastly, I just want to stress that this has been purposely qualitative, purposely in narrative, and the next go-round will weave in a little more of outcome indicators, measures, but again, let me stress, that'll be quantitative, some, and qualitative for sure, but that would be coming to you in June. So. And I want to thank the leadership team for being forthright in what they shared here and allowing us as a team to bring to you as a board and community a mid-year is how we're doing.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Bill. I want to thank the administrators, because in general, just having a document like this that lays out thinking, I think is extremely helpful, because it opens up an opportunity for dialogue about a variety of topics moving forward. understanding how you're thinking. To me, as I read this, it's a set of things that occurred, but it's also a philosophical statement on what you feel is important. And that's, I think, really helpful for us as a board, but also for the community. I think this is a great practice and one that we should continue going forward, because although we've presented things like this, we've never really encapsulated it well in a document. So I found that very helpful. Thank you.
I would also just add that it's really nice to see, in terms of communication, to know that this came out of a collaboration with your leadership team. So everybody is on board with it and everybody participated in the creation of it. And that means a lot in terms of feeling as a board that, okay, this is going to move, we're moving in this direction because this is what all of you felt were the right next steps, right direction. So thank you.
I want to add that today I did the painting on the mural, and I just was asking the kids. Of course, Joe told me about it, but I decided to ask the kids that were painting with me. I wish you were there. we missed the schedule together. But anyway, and what they said is exactly what Bill has encapsulated with this. It was their story. It was their progress. It was about positivity. These kids are trying to be positive and create that healthy environment for the middle schoolers. And that writing, that sketching, that drawing brought and created that imagery. And I think that it's a good thing if we practically enforce it as well. So it's just beautiful, like how all the layers are sort of working in that frame mind. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
We can throw questions out, right? I guess I'll do the same order, if I get Lou to talk first, and then for no reason at all, we'd go FMS second and Hillside third. But reading it, I think we all knew the nurse and the health office jobs went to a 24/7 job, which is the way I believe the high school, phrased it. That one, I'm more confident that as we go from Omicron maybe to the Omega variant, we finish it up. That one I can see resetting back to a 5-day job. So as I read about, administrations in a lot of places are feeling the job changed, overwhelmed, or it became a 7-day-a-week job. Would you share anything you're feeling, aspects that are related to COVID that might pull back? Versus, has there just been a job change, perception change as well, that you feel might be sticky, might linger past it from the high school point of view? Is it mostly a two?
I'm going to give you the point of view from the most senior administrator in the district. I'm not going to give you my high
No,
school.
Lou, actually, just because I think people at home might want to hear this too, yeah. Could you grab a mic and come on up here?
No, I'm not bashful.
He's got a loud voice.
And I'm just trying to be productive. So I'm going to give you the point of view of the administrator that's been here outside of Maureen the longest, right? And COVID does have an effect on this, but I think I'm going to tap a little bit off of what Bill said at our opening convocation at the beginning of the year, where he told us not to judge, but to question. And our community has been really, over the last couple of years, judging. And we see that in the interactions we're having with parents, the interactions we're having with community members. And at my last PTSA meeting, I put it out there, and I asked parents, and if you read the portion in that report that talks about community being a challenge, and that we have strong partners in the PTSA and SEPTA and other community organizations, it's because I'm going to them and asking them the following. I'm asking them to tell their constituents before they send that harsh email to pause and to kind of think about what we're looking for and what our common goals are so that we can work together to solve the problem. Rather than someone send an email that may have a tone, whether it's intended or not, And that automatically, as a human being, puts our guards up, right? That happens. It's by nature what a human does. I've learned over the years that when I get those emails, I never send one back. I pick up the telephone and I make a call. Our younger administrators have to learn that. But our community needs to learn, and learn is a strong word, that we're here together and our common goal is sitting right here, right? That's what we're here for. We're here for our kids. We work hard. Yes, we you know, some people say we make a lot of money. Others will say we make a modest salary. But it is our careers. But we chose this field because of what's sitting here. And I think if we all kind of take that with Bill's lead, and that's the reason why I put it in there, is that I've learned this year, I'm not judging anyone. That's in the past. But I want the community to ask those questions. And I knew I was going to get some reaction by that, but it's intended, and it's not intended as anything bad. It's not intended to push anybody away. This is a district that we love. I graduated my 2 boys out of this district. The only thing that doesn't reside in this district for me is my bed. So I think I speak on behalf of the administrators, and we're feeling it. It's a 24/7 job. Bill does a great, he's really pushed us, and he has done it himself, not to text us or email us over the weekends. But I'm a phone addict, right? So if you're going to send me an email, and you don't read this till Monday, I've already read it. And it's who we are. So yeah, the job has changed in that there are expectations, I think, because of technology, that things can happen quickly. And I'm part of the problem. I get an email on a Saturday, I'm responding on a Saturday. So I think that has to kind of change. You know, there are times when we have to work 24/7. COVID has forced us to work 24/7. There's no changing that. But that's, we hope, is going to be in the background. But to answer your question, you know, I think I know what you were referencing, and it's because I think we as a community, and Jody said it great, this is a special place. It really is a special place. I'll tell you one last story. My second year here, I was on Best Buy on Central Avenue. And one of our attorneys, who no longer is with our firm, was standing behind me, and I turn around, and he's standing there with his son buying a Christmas gift. And he says to me, "Lou, let me sum up Hastings. You have chocolate, you have vanilla, and then you have Hastings. It's a flavor all its own. And with that comes wonderful things, and it's a flavor that we love. It's a flavor that's been here for 17 years in my heart and with my kids. My wife works in the district. But we have to love one another, and that's kind of changing. And we go right to the bad place, and that can't continue. So that's it. So you know I'm never bashful, but I hope I answered your question. But the administrators are feeling stressed. Yes, that is the short answer.
That's good. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Probably anyone else could answer it. Do you have any idea why, I would qualify it. Actually, I have an accent, so let me take the mask out. I'm going to qualify it. So the same way that you've expressed, and thank you, this was really deep from your heart, but the same way you've expressed this concern and said parents, right? I want you to take a minute and switch to how some community members would also say administrators and teachers. So I know you know for a fact that not all parents are like that, and not all parents are stressing. So you are 100% right. That kind of extrapolation is what happens both ways, right? And so So I just wanted to throw that out there, but I am hoping that people that listen and heard your heart will not take it that way, that, oh, Hastings parents. I just want to say that because I know that's not what you meant. And the same way that community members may also say, oh, our district workers or teachers or administrators may not mean that all of them. Amy knows that I've emailed Amy that I cherish the teachers that take care of my son every single moment. And you are right, we talk and laugh, like we share, we have a group text together. So I call them the second parents, and you could ask them, amazing. I love Hastings, we all do. So you are, and I like this thing of asking questions, not judging, because that brings clarity. And this is really a good addition to what this whole concept is, because that clarity and transparency is so important to get rid of this unhealthiness that tends to happen. So my direct question is, what can any of you speak to, apart from this whole COVID, emails always send back bad information out. Like it just, people read it and they're reading it differently. I've done that to Doreen, I can say that, because I've read her email and I've just screamed at her. And she's like, no, this is not what I meant. So, I mean, I say this because is there a way that you can verbalize or not verbalize or think about it later and let us know in which way can the community engage that will be helpful and not in the toxicity that sometimes you experience, if anyone can just give an idea.
I think we've done, this year has been, I think, a tough year, but I think we've done a lot in the area of communication with our community. I find my sharing SEPTA meetings and PSA meetings have been some of the most productive. And I think part of that is because of my openness to listen, where I had, in the past, and I'm speaking for myself, in the past, would have gotten certain questions and gotten my guard up. Not letting that happen anymore. And I think there's been an appreciation. I'm not going to speak for the other schools, but I miss having parents and community members in our building. That's been tough. There's only so much Zoom and Google Meet you can do, and you lose something in those conversations and in those meetings. Having a conversation with a person makes a big difference, and you leave with an understanding, right? So I think that helps. But it's just an overall culture that, for a few years, had dipped, I think, in our community. People weren't feeling right. To your point, it was both ways. I want to see that improvement. I want to see it, and there's a commitment from the administrator that that's going to happen. And I'm sure that, again, absolutely not all the parents, and I would say it's a small percentage of the parents more than anything else. But it's the most vocal parents, right?
Yes, it's always a vocal one. Both ways, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm dominating.
I think it also has to do with trust, and that's a big piece of what is really the secret to our success. For relationships with our families, with our faculty and staff, or their students, that's when we see the best results. So I think, to this point, that sometimes when communications feel quickly, it's because there's lack of trust. And then that's the step that we have to reach out to try to build that trust again, so that a family member or a staff member, whoever it may be, understands that all of us are in this together and all of us have a common goal.
I think just to add, I really truly miss the in-person, right? I think there's tones, as you mentioned, in emails that can really be misread or misunderstood. It's hard in an email for communication. It lacks the sincerity and the empathy that we have as educators, and want to make that connection and that collaboration with parents. So I agree with what Lou said. I try to pick up the phone and call, like, that's how you're gonna build the relationships, even with me being new, and, you know, they can understand where I'm coming from, and I can understand them as parents coming from. So it has been challenging, it has, but, you know, still hopeful and optimistic, we'll turn things around.
You know, I'm sitting here, I'm just listening and reflecting on what everyone else is saying, and it strikes me that for a system to really be high-performing and have that level of collaboration, there also has to be room for error, that we make mistakes and we learn and we move forward from our learning. And so we have moments where things don't go 100% right on the faculty end, on the parent end, on the initial reaction end, that there needs to be a little bit of space for recovery and presuming good intention. And, you know, I hope myself in that as well, right, that we all have to make sure we're reflecting and accepting that we're a learning organization and we have to be able to learn. And we do that through, you know, an ongoing dialogue process too.
I'm going to say one thing, and that's it with relation to this. And I actually had it typed out, and it connects to this very nicely, which was basically, I mean, I am very much engaged in the community as well. And so I hear some concerns. And I have this summarized because there is that lack of understanding. And I'm so glad you said what you said, because those that I've engaged with who see the goodwill that is on the other side of the fence that they may not see. Because, I mean, and again, I'm not saying anything that is not true, because I'm like, I'm not having that experience. Like, they will share things, and I'm like, maybe because I have one child, right? So, of course, I cannot just see things out of just my lens. So I try to look at both sides of the coin. And I put this down that at some point I will share. So you're all here, so I'm going to share it. And it's just, I'm going to read it. So this is the thought process. Again, let me parents have value to what they refer to as their most cherished treasures, which is our children, which you referred to when you pointed to our students sitting here. And what I have said is that having that as their main focus, their most cherished treasures, and these individuals have served their formative years 50% of the time is right with you all, right? And it's not even in a passive way, it's really active. You engage them from class to class, from time to time. Their formative years is so you are literally another parents to them, shaping their minds and everything that they embody, and so that is factual. But one of the things that I've shared, and people that have spoken to me have heard me say this, I said that yes, these treasures will necessitate placing value on everyone who is working in our school district on behalf of them. Because when you cherish what you cherish, and you have someone guarding it, you have to also place value to that as well. But in that conversation, what came to the surface is that they feel that there's a shift of focus on the children in terms of their holistic, equitable care, especially marginalized groups or vulnerable students. And unfortunately, so this conversation had happened before I joined the board. And fortunately, unfortunately, when the SEL happened, it resurrected it again. So I'm not sure whether what you've witnessed also started happening again after the SEL results. I'm not sure, but so I just want to share publicly that I love the fact that we should learn to ask questions and not judge, and that's all, because that clarity and transparency would help us all focus on our most treasured, on our most treasured things, which is our kids. So anyway, I would just end it here. Thank you.
You know, one of the best communicators in our district, though? This is a high school with our students. Because they don't have any hidden kind of reason why they're coming into my office to ask me a question. Their communication is pure. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
And they're excellent communicators. Bill can tell you when he goes to a student union meeting, they sit around that table, around that circle, and they let it out there, right? There were no hidden secrets. There's something for us to learn from that, right? And I appreciate the fact that there's communication out there that we need to do better. And I think we recognize that. And to the old timer, yeah, I got stale, and I need to figure that piece out. Bill and I have had that conversation. We've been in a little bit of a rut, all of us, as a community. And I think we need to change that. And our kids are the focus. Seeing them happy this year in school has changed many of us. That 1 year when they weren't in school, we missed them. And refocused us back on why we're doing this. So there's a commitment from the administrators that you'll see. And we want everyone, and it's not just parents. You know, there are community members who are no longer parents, they don't have people in the district who are still, involved, let's use that word. And teachers, right? There are some teachers who are helping us in a certain way, and there's some teachers who are, the proverbial anchor dragging us across that water, right? We're working on it. We've had those conversations in faculty meetings. Drew's coaches, everything from, you walk into food service, and Viola's there, always smiling, always happy, always singing, right? And that kind of lights up kids. And that's what we have to do, right? So this conversation is healthy. Because you used the word, we need to get rid of the unhealthy. So I guess I'm happy that I put those lines into my portion of the report, because it wasn't meant to tell parents to back off. That's not my intent, ever. My intent is to say, hey, have those conversations, because we feel that unhealthiness between the community, not parents. I'm not saying just parents. It's community and the school. And the school means everyone. And it goes open some of our eyes. He's very quick about, if one of us gets negative, he's very quick about, we're stopping it. And he does it in a way where we know we got this, but we also appreciate it, right? And that comes from years of experience of being able to be, just a great leader. So you have our commitment. We're moving forward. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
I just have one comment too. I think it's about, I hope that the parents have been a little bit better. I think that the transparency of Bill makes a huge difference. I think that when people feel, especially parents in the past years, have felt that they didn't really know what was going on, it's, you blame the administrators. Why aren't you telling me what's happening? So hopefully that's improved things for you guys a little bit. And I think, I can't remember if it was Lou or you, Jen, my daughter can't even go because she's not in it. And I know that's not your fault, but I think that not come together and say things. And, like COVID, what's happening with COVID, my hope and goals in being on this board is to get so that people can start being in person again and really interacting, because I think that will be the real key to getting all of the parents and all of the community back together. You know, we don't, even parents don't run into each other at like a school function anymore, you know, like just in seeing like the parent-teacher night, you know, like at the beginning of school, it's on Zoom, you don't even interact with your other fellow parents that way. So it's hard to, you know, we live in a country of us versus them, and it's not surprising that it would affect our community as well. But thank you so much for all that you guys are doing to try to, you know, make things better. We do appreciate it.
Thank you. All good things. I won't say anything else. This is great. Very helpful. I think you can all stay if you'd like, or hit the bricks, and I say that lovingly. Feel free.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I have to excuse myself as well, I'm sorry, but my husband's leaving for work, so I have to be home with the kids. Slide those down.
Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll take the role of vice president.
Yeah.
You're welcome to it.
Or just the chocolate next to the vice president. Okay, business items. So 7A, does anybody have any questions about business items 1 through 12? No. Okay, do I have a motion to approve business items 1 through 12? And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Do I have a motion to approve 7B, the placements and/or services for CSE and CPSE? A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Ryan Ellison.
Take care, Allison. Thank you. Personnel items 8A, B, and C, appointments, resignations, and leaves of absence. Does anyone have any questions or comments about items underneath A? Do I have a motion to approve personnel items 8A through C?
So moved?
A second? All in favor? Okay. Any questions about the minutes from last meeting? 1/24/22. A motion to approve minutes from the Jan 24 board meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Policy second read. We've got two policies up for a second read. 104 and 2110. Anybody have any questions or comments about policies for a second read before we vote on them?
I just would flag for the board that, and thank you for getting the red line. We listened to Doug last meeting, so we're trying to make sure we do that. But the version you have, we did red line with attorney guidance, Suzanne Volpe. We had one set of comments, we took nearly all of them in. One clarifying fact that may not have been clear to the public or to the board is that this does apply to both students and adults, so that's why some of the language is in there. But the red lines show, so you can, as a board, then know what the changes are.
The adult terms have been grouped outside of the kid terms, basically.
I mean, it's a technical thing, which I'm sure will be removed, but it says sample policy on it still?
Yeah, at that point, we can, once you adopt it, we would, I guess we could have redlined that, but
Yeah, okay,
we don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
yeah. Okay, do I have a motion to approve policies 104 and 2110? A second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, Board of Ed comments?
May I I just really want to thank the board for the work on the diversity, equity, inclusion, and the policy committee in particular. I really compliment, and I mean this with all just straight up fact, I really compliment the three of you for the work on this, because this is not an easy lift, and you all did it with grace and style and rigor. I mean, you didn't agree, which was very healthy, but you got the yes. You know, and I really appreciate that. And I think it means for Gus and the hundreds of thousands that will follow Gus here, I think it means a lot, so thank you.
Great,
And thank you for your leadership.
Please, Melissa, you know,
Actually, Melissa as well.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the superintendent and Maureen, because Bill is very, okay, so what I'm hearing is, he's very good at it, so that was very helpful, and Melissa putting everything together, so thank you. Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank you,
just wanted to
everyone.
get that in, sorry.
Thank
Yes.
you to the time and energy on behalf of the Administration and Policy Committee for all that. I know it's a lot of work. Board comments. Or second public comment? No, no one here. Board comments?
I just have one, and which is for the community that, yes, the administrators said what they said about being open, but I also want the community to know that when we came in, we brought the communication and engagement committee that would also increase. So we also here as a board, and I'm not trying to speak for all of us, but if I'm saying anything that I shouldn't be saying, you can publicly correct it. But we also started a new committee, communications and engagement, to allow this whole homeostasis that we are all looking for and coexistence that we are all looking for between the community and the schools as a whole. So I just wanted to publicly make that clear, official, so to speak, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a board comment. And I feel like I'm on a soapbox, talking to no one, so I don't mind just putting it in the record. If there are people out there watching live or on tape, the board just did take a preliminary budget that shows a 6.5% increase. And I didn't want it to be received silently, but I didn't feel like, now was the time to open up and ask any real questions. I think one of the challenges of our board is to try to figure out where to be involved and where to know how to be an effective board that's an oversight and doesn't pretend to think that, we have institutional knowledge or we actually have more knowledge about this industry than our administrators. We want our administrators to use their knowledge to make decisions. But as a board that's looking at a significant change in the budget growth, and it's 6.5% as a preliminary number, I will just go back on my soapbox and talk a little bit. I love the slide that said, we are supposed to be maintaining core programs, planning so that we have the resources to educate all students.
Yes.
One of our areas of growth that might pop out is our growth in special education. So personally, as one of 7 of our trustees, I did want to voice that's absolutely a core program, and it represents my core values.
Yeah.
So where is there flexibility? We know whether it's benefits of 13 million or salaries of 24 million. It's not in the contracts for teachers, which are essential and integral, and teachers and staff. And obviously, no board oversight role is supposed to be looking at pensions or health insurance. Capital projects have already been improved, and the debt is ours to handle as a community. But 6.5% growth is, in my opinion, growth that warrants an open consideration of things that might have to be considered for change, for cuts, for trade-offs. I don't think 6.5% growth is something that our community is expecting or wants to fund, and if I'm wrong, they can absolutely pass every budget they want. This budget would come in under the tax cap. It would be a 51% pass, and this is completely a preliminary budget as the slide showed the calendar and the timing. I don't feel that 6.5% growth represents what our community's ready to handle. We are lucky through the stewardship to have reserves and balances to help change that. And whether it's 4% going on to the residents, some of that growth is sticky and will continue in ways that could be 5% and 6% in future years when we don't fund it with reserves. So in future meetings, I would like, to be discussing If that number is not what we want to share with our administrators as guidelines for this budget or future budgets, for me, just some things that always have been in my mind. Class sizes, if we raise the number of kids in class sizes, that would change staffing levels, not through layoffs, but through the more natural way of how many people do we hire. I would be considering pulling back on technology. I'd be considering pulling back, as everyone knows, on out-of-district busing, and I'd be considered on pulling back on professional learning expenses that are outside of our district. I'd be considering looking at pulling back on new programs where we have recently grown them. And of course, I think our board, as always, has to keep an eye on using reserves to smooth out unusual increases versus using reserves annually to lessen the tax burden if it has an effect of creating what I believe, paraphrasing badly, Maureen said, could be creating a hole in the future. If you don't do it, it also creates a hole as you do it. So very much appreciated that slide presentation. The details were awesome early in our budget season, but I know we didn't ask any questions, but the board, personally, I do have concerns looking at numbers like that. Thank you to all of our administrators. Have a lovely week.
I have a comment on what Jeremy's saying too, is that I agree that the amount seemed high to me as well. And being a new board member, what I don't know is, my fear is that something like that becomes what is annualized and that you just keep seeing that growth every year. And Maureen, what I'll reach out to you about is like, what is the historical for me? Like, what is it normally? That would be helpful for me.
Yeah,
just
and
so
honestly,
you know.
I was going to include those. I just, with timing, I had.
No,
such a
I get it.
presentation.
That's, I'm just
Because
saying, like,
that will
yeah,
help.
that's,
Yeah.
so that's all I want to understand too, based on what Jeremy is saying too. I agree, it seemed really high, but I didn't know if perhaps that's a standard, so thank you for that. And then I have a question just from, I think it's probably directed to you, Melissa, that the STAR assessments have been sent to parents. Will there be an update from you or somebody in the administration about how it looks versus last time? Or are we going to wait till the third one is done and then we'll have a summation at the end of the year for the SEL and for the assessments?
So two things. So we still have one more administration of STAR. So the letter that I went out actually highlighted just some additional things in the report, and the great news that it's now available in eSchool. So we're working.
Yeah, and congratulations, that was great.
Oh my gosh. I just want to publicly thank Adriana Boudreau, our data coordinator, who jumped through hoops that were doing all sorts of machinations to make sure that that could happen. And she worked tremendously hard. And it was so funny because once they were finally released, and it was a day where we didn't have school because of the weather. We still planned, let's get this out, let's stay on track, and she was texting me, from her home, like, can everybody get in? Are you getting any parent feedback? Are we good? Like, can I help in any way? She's just been so incredible in getting that up and moving. So I just did want to take the opportunity to publicly recognize her. But to your question, so there will be a final learning impact presentation to the Board of Education, and there will also be, in the portal, I brought that up, we are going to go back and upload the fall reports too. We didn't want to confuse folks, that all of them will be in the right location. And we will provide some updates via the letter for the next administration about taking a look over time at student reports.
Yeah, because obviously I look back to see how my kids are doing, but being a member of the board, I want to know how our communities students are doing, if we're seeing that, especially when the SEL one, I think will be important to see. But the grades and who's behind, and I know it was a small percentage last time, but, it'd be nice to see if that was lifted. Thank you for that. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, it's a very, very useful piece of the puzzle, so we're happy to have it.
But as the admin told me, it's just one piece.
One piece. One piece. Just a moment. Yeah.
If I could say one short thing, just, because we're on the topic of budgets, obviously, and percentages and numbers, this is one of the reasons I think that North Star process is so important, because to understand, we've had this discussion before about budget is a set of numbers, but it's also a set of values. And the North Star process, even though it's very abstract and it seems sort of disconnected, it's that sort of narrative element that adds value behind those numbers. And I think even just from a functional perspective, I'm a parent now with a child in second year of high school. I think when I was a Hillside parent, I didn't appreciate or know about what went on in the middle school or the high school, or even when I had, FMS kids, I didn't know what went on in the high school. I think there's a lack of understanding, because it's not explicit, of how the pieces connect together, how your child starts here and is going to end up there, and all the possibilities that we have and that we're trying to arrange. So, I value that North Star process because I think it will give people, residents, community, a better understanding of what we're really trying to do here, specifically on the behalf of the students. And so when we're looking at numbers, we have a sense of, why those numbers exist. So I think it's important for that reason.
I think you're right, especially as we think about potentially cutting something, where it comes from and why. We've chose that, not this, so agree.
A motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.